This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It is 3 minutes after 10. Let me echo Thomas's gratitude for the numbers that he just shared with you regarding the amount of people now listening to this programme. I think that it is the largest audience LBC has ever recorded, certainly in the RAJAR period. As long as RAJAR has existed, this is the largest audience, which for a mid-morning programme is truly extraordinary. And I say that simply to express my gratitude to my colleagues, Eleanor, Keith and Roxanne, and of course Thomas, bringing you the news headlines, but most of all to you. Because it's mad, right? This is supposed to be the sort of the dog whistles and the lazy racism, the invitations to hate people, the invitations to blame foreigners for all of your problems, the invitations to break things, the reverence that we reserve for moral bankrupts like Boris Johnson and epic incompetence like Liz Truss. That's supposed to be what's popular. That's what they tell us populism is. So you'll allow me a moment this morning, I think, to reflect upon what a massive lie that is. And speaking of liars, I'd also like to thank all the weirdos and racists who spend their lives tweeting and posting about me on social media, because there is no better advertisement for the antidote that we try to offer every day to the poison that they and their heroes spew. So please, lads, never change. 4 minutes after 10 is the time. And speaking of the spewing of poison, isn't it remarkable how the reverence in which the Commonwealth was reportedly held during Brexit conversations has disappeared? I mean, how quickly? Claims that we'd be closer to the Commonwealth. We don't need to be in the European Union because we should be treating our Commonwealth neighbours, our Commonwealth partners with more respect and with more gratitude. You remember that, right? It was a big thing. Somehow the Commonwealth felt less foreign to xenophobes than the European Union did. Well, not anymore, because Commonwealth heads of government are preparing to defy the United Kingdom and agree plans to examine reparatory justice for the transatlantic slave trade. How many Commonwealth countries do you think there are? Do you want to have a guess? 56. It says 56 here. Which is really? One of them suspended? Holy moly. No one tells me anything. What for? Is it VAR? I think there might have been a coup in one of them, but they're still technically a Commonwealth country. They are just a suspended Commonwealth country. You don't cease to be a Commonwealth country when you are suspended, only when you are expelled. But Gabon, I think, is having a little local difficulty at the moment. The Foreign Minister of the Bahamas has told the BBC, who have broken this story, that once you broach the subject, it may take a while for people to come around, but come around they will. Keir Starmer hasn't. He's rejected calls for any talks at all at the current meeting of the Commonwealth in Samoa, and has essentially insisted that the focus on the future of the Commonwealth should be the main concern of the conversation. He's ruled out compensation for the UK's historical role in the slave trade. Things that there's no point... what's the word I want? But things that there's no point regurgitating unless you do a little bit of research first in the context of this conversation include, well, the Irish were enslaved as well, or we were the first to abolish it, or we spent loads of money already, because these are all historically untrue. I'm fascinated by, as you know, the effort that is put into persuading us to believe things that are against our own interest. Because if you end up believing things that are against your own interest, you can then vote against your own interest. You can do things that are bad for you and your children. And, of course, we only have to go back to 2016 for a masterclass in exactly what that looks like. And I've been a little bit puzzled. Listen, you can probably guess the kind of question I'm going to ask at the end of this pontification, so feel free to book your place early on the switchboard. But I have been a little bit puzzled by the Venn diagram of people who spend enormous amounts of money secretly to promote incredibly unpatriotic and damaging ideas while dressing themselves up in Union flags and the language of patriotism. You know, when they talk about a small state or small government, and then you open your eyes and realize that we spend our lives talking about areas of our shared existence where we need more investment and we need more bodies, we need more staff, whether you were talking about the NHS or whether you're talking about schools, whether you're talking about social care, whether you're talking about the army or the police service. specialist prisons or the probation, a building, house build, all of these areas where government needs to be bigger and needs to be stronger. And yet the narrative in this country, the public discourse in this country, thanks largely to the infestation of deeply disingenuous lobby groups that call themselves think tanks or educational charities, they have managed to skew the dialogue, to skew the conversation. But why would they also be so heavily invested in attempts to rewrite history? Or at least in attempts to stop other people from doing proper history? Why would, for example, someone heavily involved in, I don't know, let's say the Institute of Economic Affairs, ludicrous misnomer, the Institute of Economic Affairs, the Institute of Wizard Wheezes. Why would someone heavily involved in that outfit also be heavily involved in trying to get the National Trust to stop publishing history of National Trust properties, especially when that history involves explanations of where the money came from? Have you ever visited a National Trust property? I presume if you've never visited one, you've driven past one. Before the children came along, and actually for a while they were younger, Mrs. O'Brien and I had a lovely habit of, if we weren't in a rush to get wherever we were going, if we passed one of those brown signs on an A road, we'd go and have a look. We'd go and have a butcher's. I think we joined English Heritage and National Trust. And it was glorious. But the thing you do, it's a bit like looking at St. Paul's or looking at a massive cathedral in somewhere like Ely or Lincoln. You look at it with your 21st century sensibilities, your 21st century eyes. Sounds like a pop song, that, 21st Century Eyes. And you just wonder how the hell it happened. How did it get built? How on earth did it get built? And the accrual of cash, the epic imbalance between the kind of people who could build a stately home and everybody else in the country. And then I remember a story that really stuck in my mind, really stuck in my memory, about Capability Brown, the gardener. It's a slightly underselling him with that title. But I remember that he was doing some landscaping for an aristocrat, and the aristocrat wanted, or Capability Brown decided he was going to move a river. So all the sort of local workers from thereabouts were employed for the duration of that job to reroute a river so that the bloke's view from his stately home would look nicer. And I loved that story until I just, for no reason particularly, suddenly realised that I didn't know what they did afterwards. You didn't have trade unions or contracts in those days. So it's all very well us looking at this amazing view, enjoying this amazing vista, paying our couple of quid and buying a guidebook to go around these amazing houses. But what we really need to know is the role that they played. And what they can tell us about the society that people were inhabiting at the time. And oddly, the same sort of vampires that run these think tanks are dedicated to trying to keep the truth about slavery, for example, or epic inequality from the public. And I had a penny drop moment last week. I realised why. And it's for the same reason. It's about sustaining a hideously unfair status quo. That's all it is. Understand that, you understand almost everything. Imagine if you arrived in like Panem. Are you familiar with the Hunger Games? Have you seen the Hunger Games or read the Hunger Games? So all dystopians have a kind of pinnacle, right? All dystopias have a pinnacle. So if the massive majority of the population is oppressed, there will be some people living at the top of the pyramid, and they will be living lives of untrammeled luxury, epic luxury, on the backs of the labour of everybody else. These are extreme examples. We don't inhabit a dystopia, although some of the stories coming out of America suggest that they might be doing so soon. And the people at the very top live lives of extraordinary luxury, funded and subsidised by the labour of everybody below them. And, of course, if that labour is unpaid, then it is slavery. And if those labourers are owned by other people, the people destined to be or already located at the very top of the pyramid, then the last thing on earth that their descendants would want, or that people who still quite like the status quo that we've got today, or people who consider themselves to be either current or future beneficiaries of epic inequality, the last thing they want is to let the dog see the rabbit. And guess what? We're the dog. You and me are the dog. And they don't want us to see the rabbit. Because what the hell happens if we really start to get our heads around historical injustice? What? And how can I stop you from caring about this? Well, I will appeal, as I did with Brexit, and as I am with the European Convention of Human Rights, if I was honest Bob Jenrick, I'm going to appeal to your xenophobic impulses. We all have xenophobic impulses. The challenge is deciding how readily you're going to allow them to be excited. I could challenge your I could excite your xenophobic impulses to such a degree that you might gather outside a hotel full of asylum seekers and call for it to be set on fire. Or you might take to social media to complain about people being jailed for doing so. That's all xenophobic impulse. You wouldn't be doing that if the hotel was full of people you know, or people that look like you, or people you're related to, or people that you like. So it's all a xenophobic impulse. So how can I get people to stop worrying about the status quo? How can I distract them from the epic inequality upon which the class structure and the distribution of wealth in this country is built? I could bring a little bit of racism into it. Which is why suddenly all of the Commonwealth leaders that Brexiters told you they wanted to treat with increased respect and enormous reverence and build bigger bonds, return to the days when the Commonwealth would be our bigger trading partner as opposed to the EU, well, they're coming in for a kicking today from precisely the same people that told you we should be doing more business with them. Why? Because they are preparing to defy the United Kingdom and agree plans to examine reparatory justice for the transatlantic slave trade. Now, I've just given you what I would call some socio-economic analysis or some historical analysis. What I'm not giving you there is a particularly strong opinion on whether or not reparations should be paid to the descendants of slaves. You're going to do that. I'm not an activist, if you like, in this space. I don't have enough skin in the game. And I don't know where the money would come from. I don't know what purpose it would necessarily serve. But I follow and read a lot of people who do. One of them, Satnam Sanghera, who wrote the book Empire Land, is pretty clear on what he thinks is going on here and indeed what should be going on here. He describes Keir Starmer's refusal to discuss reparations as short-sighted and ultimately self-defeating. He describes the reparations conversation as a way of resetting Britain's relationship with large parts of the world. He says we should see it as an investment. And in Britain, it is always depicted as a shakedown. And of course, marry that to what I just said, and it is a shakedown being perpetrated by people of colour. So it appeals both to our sense of isolation, insularity, and it appeals to our xenophobic impulses as well. How dare Johnny Foreigner? They used to know their place, these Commonwealth types. They used to know exactly who was in charge. How dare they come along and demand that money be paid in reparation for the transatlantic slave trade? But that's not the end of the conversation, is it? It's not just about money. Obviously, it's not just about money. It's about something that runs a lot deeper than that. Something that I would hope you would be able to tell me about. Because if you've got all three of the candidates to be the next director of the Commonwealth, all speaking as one on this issue, then you've got a problem at the very heart of the Commonwealth. And the reason that I was teasing Brexiters early was because you claim to care about the Commonwealth. You claimed to care very deeply about the Commonwealth. So theoretically, you should care very deeply about fractures appearing in the Commonwealth, and the fact that all major leaders, all heads of government are preparing to defy the United Kingdom and start the conversation about reparatory justice. So what's your relationship with slavery? Why does this matter to you? The problem with this country, public discourse in this country and the media in this country, is that so many conversations are conducted by people to whom it doesn't matter at all, or people whose xenophobic impulses have been expertly manipulated by newspaper columnists or far-right politicians or dishonest and irresponsible broadcasters. The only people who can make a meaningful and helpful contribution to this conversation are the people who know what they're talking about, not the people wanging on about abolitionism or wanging on about Irish people being indentured labour too. The people who know what it would mean to a country like the Bahamas, why in the Bahamas heads of government consider this to be so important. British officials have successfully blocked a plan for an entirely separate declaration on the subject, which feels like a form of moral colonialism, doesn't it? Telling Commonwealth leaders that they can't even have a conversation about this thing that they consider to be hugely important. And that's the world that a lot of the people that we've been teasing in this introduction think they still live in. A world where Johnny Foreigner knows his place. A world where the rich man is in his castle and the poor man is at his gate. And especially if the poor man is black, God made them high and lowly and ordered their estate. The idea of equality, the idea of equanimity, the idea of equality is utterly alien to this world view, which appears in our breasts in primary school and prep school when we see the old maps, if you're my age, of the world being largely red. We don't live there anymore. Where do we live? Why do slavery reparations matter to you? Let's do education this morning. Let's make it clearer why people with roots in the West Indies or with roots in other corners of the Commonwealth, but obviously, most pertinently, the corners most affected by the transatlantic slave trade, why does it matter so much today that restorative justice of some sort, whether it's financial or otherwise, why does it matter so much today that restorative justice, that reparation is delivered to the descendants of people who died hundreds of years ago? Why does it matter so much to you? 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC.
22 minutes after 10. So the kind of people that I was describing in the first part of the programme. Here's one. Alan is in Leicester. Nice to hear you are on woke form this morning. Obviously, Commonwealth countries want reparations. It's money for nothing, checks for free. Idiot's Corner, I think, probably, because, of course, Alan has just heard an explanation of the importance of understanding the issues, but that's not for Alan. Alan wants to put gammon in his ears and close his eyes and just shout things. And the idea of giving money to black people is particularly obnoxious to him, regardless of what the historical or indeed moral justifications may be. I suspect Alan probably thinks we should leave the European Convention of Human Rights as well, without having the first idea what it is. And, you know, these people are on a roll at the moment. The ignorant bigot is on a roll. Look at the damage that they've done. They put Boris Johnson in Downing Street. They took the United Kingdom out of the European Union. They gave Liz Truss the purse strings of the entire nation. None of them have ever apologised to you or accounted for their actions. Now they're moving on to the European Convention of Human Rights, and they are spitting nails about the audacity of Johnny Foreigner, Commonwealth leaders, daring to suggest that we should have a conversation about historical atrocities visited upon their ancestors. When they talk about British values, they're often talking about history. So why on earth would Keir Starmer be denying Commonwealth leaders an opportunity to articulate and examine their values, which would be impossible, I think, to articulate or discern without reference to the historical injustice? It's a bit like telling Jewish people to stop talking about the Holocaust. Absolutely extraordinary arrogance, imperial arrogance, colonial arrogance. At least it is from where I'm sitting. But as you know, I get things wrong. 24 after 10 is the time. Ramon is in Orpington. Ramon, what would you like to say?
I am a descendant of a so-called slave, 7 generations. So this is 7 generations of inequalities regarding from an economic point of view. I'd also like to talk about health, the health so-called black people. I'd also like to talk about my own daughter and the economics of the situation.
Okay.
When the UK, how should I say, left the colonies, right, and gave them all independence, right? It was because the UK couldn't financially support these colonies. What happened after that? It moved from a physical slavery to an economic slavery, right? What they consider aid is really loans. They tell people that, oh, it's foreign aid, but it's really foreign loans from the IMF, from the World Bank, the UK gives, right? Now, I'd like to also talk from an economic point of view. All these countries are poor, right?
Yes.
I'm going to college at the moment. I'm going to go to uni and study economics, but none of my parents or their foreparents had these opportunities. You understand what I'm saying?
I do understand what you're saying. You'll appreciate we've got a limited amount of time and an awful lot of ground to cover and a lot of people waiting. So can I ask you two questions? Can I zone in on two things already? How did you find out your own background? How do you know that you're the seventh generation
my mother
descendant?
did her ancestry thing.
Wow. Wow, I imagine there's a lot of that going on in all over the world, of course, with the technology that's become available. What a thing to discuss. I guess you kind of knew, but you didn't have the detail. And the second thing is, I appreciate there's a lot to cover, but what do you think reparations should look like?
I believe it should look like healthcare, hospitals, financial stuff, investment for businesses, for small businesses, so that the UK can do trade, right? And lastly, I'd also like to ask a question: why is my daughter Black British and not English? You understand what I'm saying? My daughter was born in this country; she's born in England. But when we fill out the form for her to go to school, I leave that out completely because it's my daughter is as English as anybody. And I'd like to say as well, the last thing I'd like to say is that black and white poor people have more in common than so rich white people, and they're controlling the narrative.
Well, that's
what I'm saying?
Yeah,
and
I mean that is
people. Yeah,
that's what I was alluding to in the introduction. Is if I mean especially, and this works perfectly. Let me read you this from Chris. Try thinking about a different perspective from a true working man on minimum wage, then giving a vast proportion in benefits and illegal immigration. This is a conversation about reparations for atrocities, for a Holocaust that was visited upon your ancestors by British people, but Chris is already using it as an opportunity to have a crack at people on unemployment benent, on people who are crossing the channel in small boats. It works perfectly.
I'd like to answer Chris in saying that when the Ukrainians, who are so-called white people, right, 250,000 of them came over, they found places for them to stay, they integrated them into the society, but when black and brown people are running away, they don't want them here. Why?
Well,
it's because of the colour of their skin?
I'll let Chris answer that. Because of their
religion?
I'll let Chris answer that. So what would reparations look like? Answer: heavy investment in infrastructure in countries still straining under the historical burden of exploitation and inequality.
Ask the question where the finances will come from.
Yeah.
The foreign aid budget. Simple.
Okay. I don't think it's simple. I doubt it's simple, but it's certainly a starting point because there is pragmatism in place, Ramon, as you know, and the magic money tree or the bottomless pot of cash or whatever you want to describe it as is it doesn't exist. There is a finite amount of resources and therefore a prioritization of resources. So the political conversation becomes about how high a priority this should be. And Keir Starmer is perfectly free to explain to Commonwealth leaders this week why he doesn't think this should be such a high priority. What he really shouldn't have done is tell them that they're not allowed to have the conversation at all. I don't even like the word defy in the first line of the BBC's coverage. It's probably me being a bit pedantic, but it's not really defying the United Kingdom. It's just refusing to agree to plans to abandon a conversation about reparatory justice. 0345 6060973 is the number you need to join this conversation. What would reparations look like? That's something that, again, you would need to have some knowledge, some understanding of both the modern reality and the historical context to answer that question. You can be absolutely certain that none of the people calling for the National Trust to be shut down or for history to be written by Conservative Party approved politicians, none of them have got the knowledge that's needed to have a proper conversation about this, which is why they're so desperate for you not to be able to have that conversation either. 10:30 is the time. Phone lines are open. Thomas Watts, how's your headlines?
James O'Brien on LBC.
This is really good. There's a professor I turn to a lot on this issue called Alan Lester. You've heard him on the programme before. He's a professor specialising in British colonialism at the Universities of Sussex and La Trobe. And he did a thread earlier this morning, in fact, and he says, I want to clarify my position. I'm a historian, not an activist for reparations. I get why the very idea of them is galling to those who see no reason why they should pay distant strangers who were never enslaved because of the sins of their ancestors. I think that's really powerfully and pertinently put. He goes on, I think there is a constructive conversation to be had about a form of reparative developmental assistance that is in the UK's national interest. But Alan's job is not to press for that, or at least that's not his primary concern. He seeks to address the false equivalence or the misinformation that is punted inevitably by people in the public sphere who were also very prominent in the Brexit debate. And indeed, he begins with a recent article that Daniel Hannan wrote for the Daily Telegraph. I saw Jacob Rees-Mogg saying that we should be giving compensation to the people that ended slavery rather than to the people that were enslaved, which demonstrates a level of historical ignorance that should qualify his parents for a refund from Eton College. But again, this is a country in which people like Daniel Hannan and Jacob Rees-Mogg, as we've seen in recent years, are treated with respect that literally nothing they've ever done deserves. So I get all of that. And I also understand why I get messages saying all these people want is money, when I've just read out the very sentence, the very phrase that works for me best in this context, which is reparative developmental assistance for countries still crippled by the consequences and the legacies of slavery. But what would it look like is a question you can't even begin to answer if you are Keir Starmer and you're telling Commonwealth leaders not even to have the conversation. So why does it matter to you? And what do you think reparations would look like? I wonder whether that applies on both sides of the divide, whether some people who are opposed to it think that it would just involve taking money out of the public purse and handing checks to people who could prove they were descended from slaves, and whether some people who are descended from slaves are in favour of reparations because they think they're going to get a check, as opposed to a new school in Jamestown, for example. I don't know, but that's why the conversation is so important. That's why the conversation is absolutely crucial. And I think the more I think about it, the uglier it is that Keir Starmer is stamping his foot and telling these people they can't even talk about it, telling heads of government from the Commonwealth that they can't set the agenda for a conversation between the 56 Commonwealth countries, which begins in Samoa on Friday. 10:35 is the time. I've got something else to say. You can tell it's probably because of my rage hours. I've got verbal diarrhea this morning, but I'll get onto it in a moment. I want you to call me, tell me why this matters so much to you personally in 2024, 0345 6060 973, but also what they would actually look like, what the reparation would involve, what the reparative developmental assistance, as opposed to just sort of little lottery wins for hundreds of thousands of Brits descended from slaves. What would it actually look like? Zenon is in Ladbroke Grove. Zenon, what would you like to say?
Hello, I'd just like to say I come from Trinidad and also come from Greece. And the thing is with Trinidad, historically the British involvement there put a lot of the natural resources into the hands of obviously private corporations such as BP. So part of the restorative justice or reparations would be actually having the national resources and the national, let's say the wealth being put back into the hands of the people
that live on the land. That
live on the land, who it should have originally belonged to pre-colonial and pre-imperial days. Besides that, though, I feel like what's happening now with the lobbyism at the government level, what was happening when Rishi Sunak was the PM, when this whole most recent genocide began last October, is endemic or indicative of a wider issue of continued exploitation when it comes to our foreign policy. And I think Keir Starmer's policy on the Middle East is completely indicative of a situation where, reparations aside, our government is proven time and time again that it just wants to continue with this policy of
what?
Of sticking British corporate interest in front of any other any
I
other.
don't know if that applies to the current conflict. I don't know that it's corporate interests in the Middle East. And obviously, I have to note an awful lot of people are still very unhappy with the use of the word genocide, although it's become impossible for anybody honest to object to the use of the word ethnic cleansing, especially in the context of some comments made in the last couple of days by up to and including someone who served 4 Israeli prime ministers and was deputy head of the country's National Security Council. But I'll just mark that. I also found the historian William Darimple's recent contribution to this conversation on social media and his deployment of that word very helpful and illuminating. But it would be remiss of me not to recognise that some people listening will be very upset by the fact that you've used that word. I'm a little bit confused as to some of the parallels that you're drawing, although I'm not rejecting them. I'm just wondering whether it would be more helpful to steer you back to the conversation that we're having today, which is 2 questions. Number 1, why do you care? And number 2, what would the reparations look like? Because respectfully, you've just veered away from both of those questions at about 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, no, I do understand that it is quite a jump. But I mean, in the sense of, the British arms industry is obviously massively profiteering from a...
Well, not really, no. See, this is why I worry that it's an unnecessary distraction from the conversation, because we're not a particularly... big supplier of arms to Israel, and many of the licenses, of course, have been suspended since Keir Starmer and David Lammy came into government. So, I mean, I'm not going to fall out with you, but I am going to give you one more chance to contribute to the phone-in that everybody else is having.
Yeah. Well, in terms of the restorative thing, I believe, like I said before, that the national ownership of the resources should go back into the hands of the indigenous people, and I don't believe that I should be in a position to receive any form of like direct compensation, as I personally wasn't involved. But if there was a historical situation where I was to find out that some of my family's land had been taken or something, then that land should obviously be put back into the hands of the people who it was taken.
I mean, this is why it's the conversation is a little bit more nuanced than some of the contributions allow, because what if it was taken by the Normans in 1066? Of course, the last Duke of Westminster said that thing that I refer to regularly, so regularly that I'm bound to find out soon that he never said it at all. When someone asked him for advice on being the richest man in England, he replied, "My advice to you is to have an ancestor who was best friends with William the Conqueror." And of course, you also then get the applicants for Idiot's Corner. So here's one. Should the UK get reparations from Italy, which I presume refers to the Roman Empire? And Jack in Bristol says, will the African people who sold other tribes to the white man have to make reparations as well? To which the answers are exactly the same, lads. If you can demonstrate evidentially, historically and documentarily that the consequences of the actions you describe by the Roman Empire or by slave traders who were themselves African, if you can show the modern consequences of their actions in the context of their current status, their current wealth, then yeah, absolutely, you could make a case as well. I don't know where you'd do it now that we've left the European Union in the context of the Roman Empire, but you'd need to show you're working. You'd need to demonstrate the historical cycle which explains how inequality and unfairness today has its roots in the Roman Empire. Spoiler alert, you haven't got a hope in hell of doing that, because it's simply not true. But it makes you feel better about the racist impulse you have when asked about slavery reparations to just shout something about the Roman Empire or African slave traders. And I know you're too thick to realise it, both of you, but that is the point of this entire conversation. Because if the history was fully understood in the way that post-independence it increasingly is in Commonwealth countries, not only would it be impossible to sustain the idea that reparations are not necessary, morally necessary, never mind economically, but you would also be punching enormous holes in things like the royal family and the entire aristocracy. So when I tell you that the people who are opposed to this are protecting a rancid status quo, I'm reminding you it's the only status quo we know. And that's why some people who don't benefit from it at all are terrified at the idea of it being in any way dented, damaged or fractured. It's not unlike when Prince Harry had the audacity to fall in love with a woman of colour. That flew in the face of this implicit, subconscious sense of superiority or hierarchy, which the royal family is the human embodiment of. And it's all a dangerous lie. Eddie is in Stevenage. Eddie, what would you like to say?
I was going to ring about something else, but I just need to make a quick point about what you said when people say about the Roman Empire and the African countries.
Come on, man. I just closed that down like a boss.
You did, but you neglected one point.
Go on, then.
How can you claim from a state which no longer exists? So the Roman Empire...
Well, he did say Italy, to be fair. I mean, historical illiteracy is a forgivable offence, but where's the government? Where's the royal family that introduced? Is Italy currently still run? Is the head of state of Italy someone whose fortune was built upon the enslavement of Picts and Saxons in 50 years BC? That's the point you're making.
The issue is with that is Romans and Italians are genetically different races. They're not the same people. There's a lot of interbreeding. If you go to the genetics of it, I think there's about 10% of Roman. The Roman Empire wasn't just Italy. It spread across quite a lot of the world. So to define Italy as Rome isn't correct in that sense.
No,
also,
and equally, it is not very helpful to claim that the state of the United Kingdom today, in terms of equality and fairness and distribution of wealth, is a consequence of the antics of Julius Caesar and his mates. But let's steer you back to the reason why you did ring in.
Yes. In terms of reparations, and I hear this conversation from a lot of people, how slavery hasn't affected us to this day. Well, I can say slavery has affected me, it's affected my father, and it's affected my grandfather whilst living in this country. Up until 2015, we were still paying off the slave owners for their compensation. Yeah. So essentially, I've paid for my own freedom, which... how is that?
The relationship between taxes and the Treasury and the settlement of loans. Yeah, I there's nothing controversial about what you said, but it's another proof of that thing I just mentioned before you came on. The more that the history is known, properly understood, the more impossible it becomes to defend the status quo. And that's why they're terrified of the National Trust, publishing history of National Trust properties and all the rest of it. And they talk about eroding British values or being ashamed of being British. They're terrified of the truth.
This is completely true. And when it comes to reparations, I think it's the most... It's a difficult word because reparation means so much to so many different people, especially in this context. Are we talking about reparations for the colonies, or reparations for slavery? And I think sometimes when you get into conversations, the two get combined and think that reparations for colonies what people are asking for, when they're actually asking for reparations for slavery.
Mate, some people think it's a conversation about handing checks to anyone who can prove that their ancestors were enslaved, like literal checks, and that's where envy kicks in. Why should they get some money? You know, my ancestors might have been working in cotton mills in Manchester. Why should they get money and I don't get money? My ancestors were exploited by the aristocracy as well. It's all designed to distract from the history, from the central points of fact, and you can see that from space if your eyes are open.
It is, but some people's eyes are closed. The issue with reparations, I'm not saying that every person should be given money. Reparation can be
I know you're not.
In different ways. So
that's never going to happen. That's not even on the agenda. But for Keir Starmer to shut down the conversation when there are so many different angles to it, it's really obnoxious.
I do think it is, but I think he's kind of like cutting between a rock and a hard place because he's trying to appease everyone. And there is that massive right-wing support base who would see nothing more than to turn their back on Keir and never give him any support if he allows reparations.
Yeah, but look what we're doing. We're having a conversation about it.
That this is the thing, is we think about it logically. The only way we're ever going to solve this issue is completely addressing it. It's been plastered. It's
not going away. And the only people who think it will go away, should go away, or can be ignored are the people who still subscribe to some form of hierarchy of humanity based upon race. Emma puts, and a lot of people who subscribe to that hierarchy don't know that they're subscribing to it. Emma puts it very well. I think for detractors that reparative compensation would involve having to acknowledge that we weren't some special superior form of culture able to bring progression to the rest of the globe. Rather, we peasants got the table scraps of the proceeds of the organised crime. So we're really protective of those scraps and refuse to notice the actual victims of the crime syndicate, which addresses the question I was going to ask Eddie. Why do people who have no have no spoils, of the slave trade. And I know that in the context of buildings and infrastructure and national interest, and everybody benefited from elements of the fortunes that were made, whether it was in, the endowment of schools and charities or statuary, whatever it was. But why do people whose personal financial security today has absolutely nothing to do with fortunes made by slaving ancestors, why do they take it all so personally? Answer: because of the effort that's put in to persuading them to hate. 10:48 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC.
51 is the time. I don't know what Starmer's motivation here is. I think that the last caller might have touched on something about him bending over too far to appease the kind of people who are responsible for almost all of the bad things that have happened to the country in the last few years. That's why I was so refreshed by the response of the criminal justice system to the what many people like to refer to as the Farage riots, the very racist and murderous riots that attempted murderous riots that polluted the country just a few months ago. He certainly didn't show any signs of trying to appease those bilious spewers of poison and attempted murderers of asylum seekers, but in rhetorical spaces, I don't see. I think he calculates like a lawyer, and he doesn't see the benefit of having a conversation about reparations. He only sees the disbenefits, the coverage. I don't think he spends his time worrying unduly about coverage in right-wing newspapers. If he did, he'd never get out of bed in the morning. The poor fella can't even go to a Taylor Swift concert without causing a national brouhaha, if you follow some of these media outlets. But I don't think he sees that. What's the point in having a conversation about reparations? Unfortunately, I think that morally, intellectually, and historically, the answers to those questions are really, really easy and obvious. But pragmatically, and that seems to be his guiding light, doesn't it? Pragmatism. I guess maybe he can't see it, to his shame. Marcus is in Wandsworth. Marcus, what would you like to say?
Hi, good morning, James.
Hello,
Hope you're well.
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. James, look, I just wanted to jump in on this. It's because, for me, I'm a Labour supporter. I completely disagree with what Keir Starmer has said, just like I disagreed with his stance on Brexit. This is something that I disagree with him on as a child of parents from the Caribbean, Jamaica and Trinidad. So I've been there and I've seen the legacy of... Can
you tell me a little more about that? Because a lot of people listening won't have a clue. What do you see in Jamaica and Trinidad that you know is simultaneously bad and a consequence of what happened 250 years ago? I think some of your earlier callers have mentioned it. It's the lack of infrastructure, James. The lack of support systems for the ordinary people there. Especially as I've spent more time in Jamaica. It's I remember just being there probably 20 years ago and just looking around. My grandparents were farmers. Just looking around and just seeing just the lack of support systems for people, ordinary people, still in the West Indies. So you compare the lived experience of people there to the lived experience of people here, even people who think they've got the rotten, dirty end of the stick. And some people, of course, have and on these islands. But you compare those two lived experiences, you chronicle the gulf between them, and you register that the reason why we have the better standards of living here is historically as a consequence of the blood, sweat and tears of the ancestors of the people still enduring a much inferior standard of living.
Yeah, absolutely, James, and for me, I mean, as a student, I'm Black British, I'm proud. I studied history here. As a student of history, I had to dig into a David Olusoga book to read about the real history. It's not known,
you see, is it? There's a new canon of history that people like David and his brother and Satnam Sanghera. It is just shining a light on things that actually happened.
And James, if you bring it back to the particular conversation around compensation or reparations, it's a part of a necessary conversation that needs to be had at a high level in terms of government. I know the British government, successive British governments have shied away from it, but it needs to be had because when compensation was paid to the slave owners in the 19th century, they were able to calculate a figure that was paid to the slave owners, somewhat £3 billion or £2 billion in today's money. If they were able to do that in 1860, whatever it was, but no compensation was paid to the people enslaved. And that is a wrong that has to be righted, even if we are just to have a conversation about it. But money passed hands. We were paying that through our taxes up until 2015.
It's an extraordinary juxtaposition of circumstance, isn't it? That people who were descended from slaves were having their taxes redirected to the compensation packages for the people who were descended from slavers, because those fortunes will largely still exist, or a lot of them will still exist.
Absolutely. So part of that compensation went to big slave-owning families. Some of it were, ordinary. Let's say,
did the royal family get any? Do we know?
Pardon? Sorry,
did the royal family get any?
That's a good question, James. I don't know if any went to the royal family, but definitely compensation went to the Church of England, because the Church of England participated clearly in slavery, to banks, etc., who were underwriting the slave process. So I'm not saying this is just about reparations and just about compensation and financial compensation, but it has to be part of a wider discussion. And Keir Starmer is wrong to ignore it, but it has to be part of a wider discussion.
Why do you think he's done what he's done? Why do you think? A couple of people suggesting that he's doing it because he's frightened of upsetting racists in swing seats, and they also suggest that's the same rationale or the same reasoning behind some of the comments he's made about safe routes for refugees, and possibly even his reticence on the Brexit question. So, eventually he's going to be working harder to win the votes of people that don't like him than he is to win the votes of people who do.
I think Keir Starmer has to, in some way, toe the line as a prime minister. The Conservative government wouldn't even kind of countenance this discussion, and Keir Starmer seems to be on that same trajectory, which I'm disappointed about. But it is something that will continue to resurface because it has not properly been looked at, addressed, as you said, and over history.
Yeah, and if it was, everything would change. This is the penny drop moment for me over the last few years, actually reading two of the writers that you've referred to. The penny drop moment is, because you think, why on earth have they got a problem? But I remember the first time I read a story in the Telegraph about the National Trust putting up posters showing the history of the house that you're visiting. And I could not begin to understand why people had a problem with that. But of course, the problem is knowledge. Knowledge is power. Yeah. And if the knowledge was everywhere, the argument would be over. It would be over by tea time.
Yeah, because James, I suppose, there is a direct link between how the enslaved people were treated, back in slavery times to now the descendants of slaves. And there is that lack of resources, under education, under funding. All of those issues still persist. And therefore, if we acknowledge that the majority of the source of that originated from slavery and all of the
dehumanization of black people as well, which is
exactly
inextricable from the whole process.
Some of the stuff I read, some of the kind of so-called scientific or learned people around that time, some of their writings around what black people can do, their capabilities, the scientific racism that sprung up around slavery still persists today. If we look at how...
And it's making a comeback in some quarters. That extraordinary Hope Not Hate documentary that went out on Channel 4 earlier this week, one of the many things that it unearthed was an organisation dedicated to revivifying and reintroducing to public discourse precisely the bogus race science that you refer to. They even tracked down the American tech entrepreneur who was bankrolling it. It was an extraordinary film. I'd forgotten, actually, that much of what you've just said was relevant in 2024 to the attitudes, dehumanisation and bigotries of 250 years ago. Marcus, you made me late for the news.
James O'Brien on LBC.
4 minutes after 11 is the time. I told you I was in one of those moods, partly, I suppose, as a consequence of the listening figures that you just heard. Thomas, doesn't he say thank you in such a charming way when he says thank you? I hope I sound a tiny bit like that when I say thank you. But it means I've got the confidence to go off on a bit of a mad one now. I want you to talk to me about the entrepreneurial spirit. Rachel Reeves being warned that raising taxes on entrepreneurs when they sell their companies risks damaging business creation. I mean, yada, yada, yada. Do you remember when it was the minimum wage that was going to see all the businesses close and then, not letting them have their 0 hours contract or not letting them sack people on a whim or not letting businesses... I mean, talk about the tensions between knowledge and ignorance. Talk about the efforts in the last hour to keep the status quo stable, even though it's hideously unfair and would fall apart in a hot minute if anybody actually understood the real history. And that, of course, is, to labour the point, why some people are so desperate to keep the real history away from the people, away from the plebs. But the tension between business and worker, between owner and worker, is of enduring fascination to me. I guess it's, in a sense, the absolute heart of Karl Marx's philosophies as well, and all studies of economy is about the owning class and the working class, the business owner and the worker. And I think a lot of lazy people on the left think that they have to pick a side and furiously fight, which flies in the face of human evidence. There are plenty of entrepreneurs throughout history who have done amazing things for the population at large. I think you've got to have a little bit of ruthlessness to be enormously successful, but you don't have to be hideous or bonkers. You don't have to be an Elon Musk. You could be a Bill Gates. I've got a theory about George Soros, by the way. I don't know whether I've ever shared this with you before, but if you're buying into what I've been describing all day about the notion of status quos and inequality, then George Soros is if you're a billionaire who just wants to be richer, if you're a Jeff Bezos or an Elon Musk, you want to get your own people into the White House so you can make even more money. You're never going to have enough. Less regulation, make life harder for ordinary humans, make me richer. It's an obvious impulse. It's obviously real. It exists. It's existed throughout history. But George Soros is your worst nightmare because he was better at it than all of them, or almost all of them. And then he just kept giving it all away. So obviously the engines of disruption have to attack George Soros, a victim of extraordinary anti-Semitic rhetoric, a victim of unimaginable abuses in both proper media and social media. You think, what's George Soros done to upset people? Why has he become such a target for tropes that begin in St. Petersburg bot farms and end up being parroted from the platform of whatever party Nigel Farage is a member of this week? And oh God, of course, he is their worst nightmare. He is an example of epic wealth who does not use his epic wealth to accrue more wealth. He is like living, walking proof that you can be worth gazillions and think you've got too much. Bill Gates is a bit like that as well. Hasn't he just given away a ton of money? What's he done? Is it to Kamala Harris's campaign? Speaking of the American presidential election, do you want to play a missing word? Former Trump aide claims Trump said blank did some good things too. Do you want to have a go at that one? Former aide claims Trump said blank did some good things too. It's not cauliflower. What do you think the missing word is there from a former aide of Donald Trump? Indeed, not just a former aide, but his longest-serving White House chief of staff. He did that role between 2017 and 2019. So I don't subscribe to the school of thought that says that history is a constant tension between owners and workers. I think everybody can have a good boss if they're lucky. You can enjoy working for someone who's, in the words of the Fast Show, considerably richer than Yao. The entrepreneurial spirit is one of the things that distinguishes us from each other. Some people have it, and they display it from an incredibly early age. And some people just don't have it. And neither do they want it. A couple of stories this week. I've got one of them. There was another one about the fear of starting a business. Some people are frightened of ever starting a business. That was in the news this week as well. Here it is. British workers are increasingly scared to start their own businesses, with new figures suggesting a waning entrepreneurial spirit. The country is becoming unusually risk-averse, according to some research. And I find that fascinating because I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. If you're going to start a business and you're not already minted, then you're going to have to do it on top of your normal job, or you're going to have to raise money to pay you a salary. These are big, they're like big cliffs to jump off, aren't they, in the hope that you're going to fly, but in the knowledge that you might just plummet to the ground below. It's such an intangible thing, the entrepreneurial spirit. When you think about how tangible financial success is, or commercial success is, it's one of the most measurable things in the world. You've got entire stock markets dedicated to measuring it. Commercial success, entrepreneurial success is so easily measured. It's profit margins, it's bottom lines, it's assets, it's share prices if your company's big enough. And yet this spark, about which I can get a little bit romantic, actually, I think, this spark that we call entrepreneurial spirit is almost impossible to pin down. So you know what happens next. I want you to pin it down. What is it? If you've got it and you know that other people haven't, can you try to describe to the rest of us what it is? Because somewhat weirdly, I had it. I did. I had it as a youth. I was really keen on making money in my teenage years. And I wasn't at all bad at it, actually. I once sold 250 tickets at £15 a pop for what was a glorified disco at the Stourport Moat House Hotel. 250 tickets at £15 a pop in 1988. And all I laid on was it was a disco and a live band, who were mates from school. A disco and a live band and a buffet. But because everybody got to wear a dinner jacket and a ball gown, I could call it a ball. And people would pay 15 quid to do something that they'd have paid 5 quid for if they weren't wearing a dinner jacket and a ball gown. And I arranged it all. Do you know that I don't know that, all the years we've been together, I don't know if I've ever told you this story. I hired a drum kit off UB40. Which you believe? I found a number in the yellow pages for I needed to hire a drum kit because the band could bring their keyboards and their guitars, but they couldn't bring the drummer lived in Wales. Remember, I was at boarding school in Yorkshire, and so I had to get a drum kit. This is the entrepreneurial spirit, right? Is I get the yellow pages out, I go through it, I find a company in Digbeth in Birmingham that rents out musical equipment. I ring them up and say, can you sort me out with a PA system? Yeah, of course we can. How big's the room? I said, I don't suppose you've got a drum kit, have you? And he goes, hang on a minute. Oi, Terry, have we got a drum kit? Have we got that drum kit? Yeah, we've got a drum kit. We can sort you out with I get a drum kit. I'm 16 years old. I'm doing it all on the phone from boarding school. This is like Alan Sugar, Richard Branson territory, right? Dealing with the banqueting manager at the hotel, sorting out it's not like The Apprentice because I get to keep all the money. Well, no, not all of it. There was a charity element to the proceedings as well. But the idea that I'm dealing with the banqueting manager, I remember when I turned up, having signed the contracts, paid the deposits. I turned up and I'm a 16-year-old boy, and these are proper grown-ups. I turned up to check the venue. I did it all from school on the phone. On one of those old phone credit cards. Do you remember those? Did your dad have one of those? So you could make a phone call from anywhere without having to reverse the charges. It was like a card. You phoned the operator, read out the number, or you could punch it in on I'm so old that it wasn't a given that you'd have a punching phone. It could have been a dial tone phone. But you'd phone the operator, give them the number on the card, and it'd go on your dad's phone bill, which then went on his Daily Telegraph expenses, I think. So it was a win-win situation for me. And I arranged a massive ball for 250 teenagers in a hotel in Stourport over the phone from my boarding school in Yorkshire, and it was an absolute success. So that was the entrepreneurial spirit. I suffer from something else psychologically, which is, I don't know, it's kind of unlock achievement syndrome. So once I'd done that, I didn't feel the need to do it again. I tried, my heart wasn't really in it. I did 2 more, one was all right, one was a disaster. I just didn't have, once I'd proved to myself and the world that I could do it, it died. Which means I didn't have the entrepreneurial spirit, doesn't it? Because that is something very different. That is drive that continues. So another kid at school, this is quite funny actually, they found a company that put logos on Zippo lighters. You know the cool Zippo lighters? And they got the school's coat of arms put on Zippo lighters. And in the sixth form, everyone in my school smoked. It was obscene, actually, looking back. And usually they smoke red Marlboros as well, so it's a miracle any of them made it into their 30s. But these two lads found a company that did like branded merchandise. They got the college coat of arms put on Zippo lighters, and they sold hundreds. I think they were knocking them out to old boys as well. People that had left the school, parents were buying them. Everybody wanted one of these lighters, and their markup must have been about a tenner. Because they bought so many of them, they were getting them for buttons, knocking them out at retail for an absolute fortune. And neither of them went on to be entrepreneurs. Such is the nature of public school education in this country. One of them went on to captain the England rugby team, and the other one is currently on the Financial Times. Make of that what you will. What is the entrepreneurial spirit? 0345 6060 973. That's the sort of philosophical or romantic question. But I'd like to do the slightly more prosaic one as well, if I may, because that question would be this, okay? Why are you scared to start your own business right now in 2024 in a way that maybe, and there's no way of knowing for sure, but perhaps 10 years ago you wouldn't have been? Why are you scared to start your own business? I'm not scared to start my own business. I have no interest in starting my own business. I toyed briefly a few years ago when things weren't going as well as I hoped. I wasn't getting the kind of radars that Thomas just told you about in the last news bulletin. I toyed with starting a little advertising agency that specialised in radio, because I think sometimes adverts on the radio are just like the sort of poor relation of adverts that have been commissioned for television. And if you had a real radio ear, I think people are doing this now, but it was quite a good idea. No way was that ever going to happen. Not unless I was lucky enough to fall into bed with a partner who would do all of the business and I'd just do all of the airy-fairy lunching and creativity business. So I don't have it. It's not there. What don't I have? What is it? And why are you in 2024 frightened of starting your own business? 0345 6060 973. I really want your help with this. I want answers to both of those questions. I don't want it to be one of those hours where one of the questions gets overtaken by the other one. What is it? What are we talking about? It's diminishing, apparently. It's waning. But what is? What is entrepreneurial spirit? Describe it to me. Sell it to me. Go on. And why are you currently frightened, for want of a better word, to start your own business in 2024 in a way that perhaps you wouldn't have been previously? If you hit the numbers now, you will get through. It's 17 minutes after 11. I need to tell you that Neil Basu is joining us at 11:45, former head of counter-terrorism, fascinating man, brilliant policeman. Because I just wanted some more expert insights into elements of the Chris Cabba case and the revelation yesterday in the Commons that in future police officers who find themselves in the position that the police officer who shot Chris Cabba found himself, i.e. the doc, and I've made a decision never to say his name again. You might think that's stupid, but I don't think I should know his name. And I know that is a nuanced and a difficult conversation, but the House of Commons or Yvette Cooper decided yesterday that I shouldn't know his name. And in future, anyone who finds himself, any police officer who finds himself in a similar situation will enjoy anonymity. And it just struck us both, Eleanor and I, yesterday, that Neil would be someone well worth talking to. So we'll do that at 11:45. We'll do Mystery Hour at 12. And until then, it's you. What is entrepreneurial spirit and why are you frightened of starting your own business?
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 20 minutes after 11. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where if you're just tuning in, you're going to wonder what the hell is going on. We're having a conversation about the entrepreneurial spirit. Oh, yes, we are. And the fact that it's waning, wondering why the country is becoming unusually risk-averse. I think some of the answers might be quite self-evident or straightforward. The cost of living is so high that the risks, therefore, are higher. Quite a few of you are telling me that. Overheads is the reluctance, James, says Elias. Bills, food, housing. If there were less risk to losing those essentials, there would be a greater appetite for that risk. And Elias speaks for many of you, actually. Angie very kindly says, James, I disagree. I think you are an entrepreneur. You have designed and released one of the most popular games with the Mystery Hour board game. Well done you. That's very kind of you, Angie, but I'm afraid I'm just the glamour. I'm just the handsome face on the box. The actual rubric of the game and all the hard work, all the heavy lifting was done by other people. So that's a really good example of why I'm not an entrepreneur. And the bloke who runs Big Sky Games is... the lads who run the company that makes the games, they are entrepreneurs classic entrepreneurs, and I'm not. So I know that I'm not, because I never would have got that off the ground on my own. I'd have had to phone up manufacturers. I'd have had to get old Adrian to do the questions and arrange and negotiate a fee and do this and do that. I just don't do it. But I could do it when I was 16, which is weird. Danica is in Doncaster. Danica, what would you like to say?
James, I'm calling for the first time. I'm a first-time caller, so I may be nervous.
Well, it's only me. It's only me. Go on. What made you pick up the phone?
Yes, just a little. I just want to share a little story about my son.
Yes.
He's 18. He just got into King's College, but when he was in year 8, he started selling canned drinks to his mates in school.
Oh yeah.
So he would take drinks to school, and he will be selling. And the business grew so much that he even had to get a card reader, because he found out that most of his mates wants to buy drinks, but they don't have cash. They have card. And
so he bought a card reader. How old was he?
A card reader. Then it was in year 8. So year 8, it was probably 14.
Good Lord. Oh, yeah. You can buy them in Robert Dyas. They're really easy to get hold of. But so he was knocking out, he's just doing a little markup on the drinks he was buying wholesale or buying in bulk.
Absolutely in bulk. So he started buying from pawn shop. He will buy like a pack of 6. Then the business grew to the extent that on weekends I would drive him to a bigger shop where he would just buy different kind of drinks, and he started selling. And the business got so big that it was turning over almost 200 in a week. But then the news got into school to one of his teachers. They stopped him from doing that.
They shut him down.
Yeah, they shut him down. Then COVID came. During COVID, he went on Shopify. He thought of what he could be doing, because he just like having money, not having to rely on us for money.
Yes.
So COVID came. During COVID, he sat down and he built this accessory for all on Shopify.
Gosh.
And it's all about ship dropping. And what he does is he will just display everything on the Shopify store, and everybody will be buying. So it was making money on that.
One of my nephews does that, actually. He's got the entrepreneurial spirit, and his dad has got his own business as well. So it kind of... I tell you one thing you've made me realise, because I'm thinking about me when I was that age, is and that thing that you said about wanting to have his own money. When he's got his own money, is he happy, or is he constantly looking for the next opportunity as well?
He's constantly looking for the next opportunity. He's just happy that, okay, he has that money in his account.
Yes.
And then it goes on to the next thing. So every time he's always doing things to the extent that but now he does it with his friends now. They are a group of friends. He has this group now. He now buy expensive things like shoes, like all these expensive shoes. When they come, they are on the queue to buy. And when they buy, honestly, it could make like £100 or £150 on one shoe, because they are high value.
Not
shoes.
one shoe.
Yeah, I'm telling you, on one shoe.
No, it can't be one shoe. It must be 2 shoes.
I'm telling you.
You can't. No one buys one shoe. No one buys one shoe, Danica. Well, I mean, with I suppose a few very sympathetic exceptions, nobody wants to buy one shoe.
You know, all these boys, teenage boys, this Gen Z.
But they've got 2 feet.
Oh, yeah. One pair of shoes. I know what you mean. No, come on now. You see, I'm nervous. You don't have to tell you how nervous I am speaking with you. Yeah. One pair, yeah.
I thought, this is amazing. This man is he's like the future. He's George Soros and Jeff Bezos. He's found a market for single shoes. This is extraordinary. He'll be selling Santa Saudi Arabia next. This is that's lovely. And you're proud of him. Yeah. So I'm so proud of him. And he's off to King's College. Is he now, or is there? He started?
Yeah, I started at King's College September, studying dentistry.
Oh, so he's going to be a dentist?
He's going to be a dentist.
With a side hustle as a shoe dealer?
He does everything, really. So
I love this. So he sold all the fizzy drinks. All his friends' teeth started falling out. He's going to move back to Doncaster and set up his dentist surgery.
Absolutely.
He's created his own customer base. That's lovely. But you're absolutely right. I remember my nephew, but I've got a godson as well who's got it. And part of it is haggling. I took him to Camden Market. And I get nervous haggling. I don't know if I want to say I'm very English. Is that the right thing to say? I just don't, it doesn't come naturally to me, which you might be surprised by given that I can gab for England, but I don't really do haggling, even in places where you know that the original price. I did it in Morocco because they get offended if you don't. I was buying a carpet in Morocco and the tour guide said, no, you have to haggle. I said, I don't really want to haggle. And they said, you have to haggle. Might be fear of rejection. I'm terrible for fear of rejection. My little godson, a bloke up the road said I could have it for 40. You're going to have to do better than that. We hadn't even spoken to the bloke up the road. He's 12. I'm looking at him. I picked him up at London Zoo, took him down to Camden for a bit of a treat, Godfather time, bit of a treat. Had a lemonade in a pub garden, and he says, I want to buy a jacket. Mum said I've got some money. I'll check with his mum. So we go to all the stalls in Camden Market, and he's just extraordinary. He's like the Lost Mitchell brother. He goes, I can't be doing that. And I said, no. And he brings down, and I watch it happen. And I know that he got that jacket for less than the shopkeeper wanted it to go for. Not for the kind, not a sort of happy haggle. But it was the time of year as well, so that kind of jacket was probably about to go into storage until next winter. And he was 14, he wasn't 12. I exaggerate. I couldn't have done that in a million years. He can do it at 14. His dad was an extraordinary entrepreneur. His dad built up a massive business from absolutely nothing. He's no longer with us, sadly, but he'd have been so proud to see his boy just slapping jackets all around North London. So it's there. What is it that we're talking about? What is it? 28 minutes after 11 is the time. Phil's in Hull. Phil, what can you tell us?
Hi, James. Deputy PM on the line. How you doing?
Well played, Phil. I didn't realise you were also an entrepreneur.
It's interesting because I spent a year abroad in America and I was doing business studies. And it was over there where I was sort of like really inspired to set my own business because what they spoke about, obviously, the free market capital of the world, but we were really, pushing the entrepreneurial spirit in the sense of you go out, you try, and if you fail, that's actually success.
Yeah, you're so right. That is cultural. That is cultural. When I was spending a bit of time in the States, a lot of the people, I'd be in my mid-20s, a lot of people were looking for business opportunities. A lot of them were going to franchising conferences and looking at things because they wanted to run their own business in a way that I haven't encountered in this country.
Yeah, and it was seen as a badge of honour, which I found really extraordinary at the time because, you're thinking, well, if you fail, then, you get castrated. There's a bit of a stigma around it. But over there, it was celebrated. And so I think that fear of starting something was actually, it was turned on its head, and it was saying, actually, you can, even if you go out and you start something and you fail, then actually we regard that as being better than you've been successful. But also,
it's part
initially.
of the mythology of entrepreneurship is that you have several failures before you have a big success, and yet it doesn't change the emotion that you just described, that fear of failure, which holds you back.
And I think, like, when I set up my business, I graduated off the back. So after I graduated, came back to the UK, graduated, set up my own business. But at that point, no commitment. So I think setting up a business when you're young, when you don't have mortgages and kids and all these sorts of things, I think is the prime time because obviously as soon as you're moving into it, you've got more restrictions around what you can do and the.
It's guaranteed income, isn't it? It's guaranteed income, so you know that I can just about keep my ship afloat with X come. It's Mr. McCorber territory, result happiness. But if you haven't got the guaranteed income, but you have got guaranteed outgoings, it's daunting. It's much more daunting than it is if you haven't got the
consequences are bigger. The consequences are bigger, and it's going to impact people more. So I actually encourage people not to set up their own business. But what I do say is because you've got to live and breathe it, and I think sometimes it's been glamorized in the sense of you see Dragon's Den and The Apprentice. And it's been glamorized in a way where people, where there's a lot of people. I know you're talking about people not wanting to set up business, but there's a lot of people now wanting to be entrepreneurs because they see this glamorous thing. And actually, the reality of running your own business is not that. And actually, 80% of businesses will go out of business the first year because actually you're more likely to fail than you are to succeed in this world.
Which means you've got to go in with either boundless levels of optimism, or, as you say, with knowledge. that it could go wrong, and the wherewithal in place or the resources in place to absorb the failure, and that is quite hard to get your head around. Not maybe for you as someone that has been there and done it, but for someone like me, that is quite a hard idea to get around. And oddly, it doesn't matter how much you earn or how successful you are in your normal career. There will still be people who will be thinking of. Who will have the entrepreneurial spirit. So you could be presenting the most popular radio show in the history of LBC and still thinking about setting up a production company or still thinking about doing something else on the side as a business. I don't mean like writing a book or anything like that. That spirit there, that drive, that oomph. And also, I don't know if greed is the right word to use, but you might be thinking, I'd quite like to get a £10 million payoff one day, or I'd like to set up a business and build it to the point where I can sell it. I can think all of those things, but I'm never going to do it because I haven't got that thing, whatever that thing is. It's mad, right? 11:32 is the time. Thomas Watts has your headline.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 25 to 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Neil Basu, very, very senior police officer and former head of counter-terrorism, will be joining us shortly after 11:45 to help us really come to a slightly better understanding of some of the issues surrounding the trial of the police officer acquitted of murdering Chris Cabba. I really would urge you to read into it. Listen, the reason it's been a fertile conversation, I don't know what the better word would be, is Cabba was not shot because of any of his criminal activity, except his possible involvement in a shooting the night before, in which the car he was in was seen, and that's why the attempts to stop him unfolded. But the level and the type of crime that he was engaged in was, and indeed is, or was, I mean, really horrible. Like protection rackets for recently arrived African people in this country, a word I'd not come across before. Freshies or something, is it freshies? And just the exploitation of people who are already incredibly vulnerable. So that is, I think, an absolutely essential part of the bigger picture, but it's not, of course, remotely relevant to the trial that the police officer was on, because he knew none of that for certain when the decision was taken, and neither did the jury when they threw the case out after just 3 hours of deliberation. So I found some of the conversations we've had absolutely fascinating, but I feel there's still room for a little more insight, and Neil Basu is almost certainly the man to provide it. 11:37 is the time, so that'll be in about 10 minutes, and then after that, Mystery Hour, which I love the idea of Angie thinking that proves my entrepreneurial flair because I invented an entire board game. I wish. Lewis is in Liverpool. Lewis, what made you pick up the phone on this entrepreneurial question?
Hi, James. You all right?
I'm all good, mate. What's on your mind?
I'm going to make it very, very simple for you. The first question,
thank you.
The first question is, what is the entrepreneurial spirit?
Yes.
Right? And I'm going to tell you a quick story. Okay? A long time ago, there was a young lad who wanted to be a martial arts champion in Liverpool. Right, and he went up to a martial arts champion and said,
Can I remind you that you said you were going to make it very simple?
Fair enough, then. I'll make it very simple. It's all right, then. Have you ever not...
No, you can carry on with the martial arts story. It just wasn't immediately singing of simplicity to me. I was waiting, but I think people listening think, oh, that's good, it's going to be really simple. Might have been wondering why we were suddenly talking about a martial arts champion wannabe.
Well, I would respect you've wrecked me rhythm. It was basically going to be a teachable moment.
Okay, thank you.
Right,
well, let's start again. Let's start again. There's a little boy in Liverpool, and he wants to be a martial arts champion.
He was about 18, 19, and he had a drink, and he wanted to be a martial arts champion. So we said to the martial arts champion in Liverpool, I'm not mentioning names.
Okay,
I want to be like you.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
And he said, no, you don't, son. He goes, yes, I do. Anyway, an argument ensued, and the martial arts master said to the teenager, meet me tomorrow morning on Crosby Beach. He goes, fine. All right, then. He meets him on Crosby Beach, and the martial arts master takes him into the River Mersey, and he gets him, grabs him by his head and puts him under the water, right?
Yeah.
Lets him come up and breathe.
Right.
The young man's nearly choking. He does it again. He does it again. He does it again. He does it again. Brings him on the shore. The young man's nearly drowned. That's just catching breath. He goes, why do you do that? He goes, well, when you want to fight for something as much as you want to fight for your breath, then you'll know what it's like to be determined. And that's what the entrepreneurial spirit is. It's that ability to crack up. Now, and I know because I've done it. Now, I haven't got your opportunities. I would never have the opportunity to do your job, although I think with training I could do it because I really like listening to LBC. I'll never have that opportunity. I'll never have the opportunity because of background to go.
But this isn't the entrepreneurial spirit.
It is.
No, it's
yes,
not.
It is, James.
It's not.
Yeah, no, it is. Sorry.
No, it's not.
You see, you're arguing, but...
I'm not arguing. I'm just clarifying. Entrepreneurial spirit means that I would own the radio station, not just be on it. I'm a capitalist tool.
You see, but the thing is, it's to work your way up to have that entrepreneurial spirit.
No, it's not. That's not entrepreneurial spirit. I promise you it's not. I would own it. I'd want to own it. I'd be having conversations about buying it out. I'd be trying to start something of my own. I don't have the entrepreneurial spirit. It doesn't matter how close I come to drowning in the River Mersey. I don't have it.
So I didn't say you did. At no point did I say you had the entrepreneurial spirit.
Okay.
I didn't say that. I'm trying to demonstrate to you what it is.
Well, you did say I did a minute ago, and you were talking about, I said you don't need it to do this job, and you said you do.
I would. I misinterpreted you.
That's quite all right.
Sorry.
When does the simple bit start?
Well, that's the simple bit. It's what...
Go on, with a simple explanation of what it is. All I've got now is some poor kid who's picked a fight with a martial arts champion and then nearly got drowned.
Well, it's the same thing.
Right.
You come from the background I come from. It's that sheer determination, and I've built up a business that wasn't easy and was hard work, but I stuck with it.
Why weren't you frightened of failure? Well, because that seems to be the thing.
I had no choice. I was, but I had no choice. It was either. I had no choice. Because failure's a choice. If you say I'm going to try and do something, yes, it is.
Well, it's not any more than drowning is a choice. If that martial arts artist had kept your mate's head under the water, he'd have drowned. He wouldn't have had any choice in the matter. He'd have just drowned. That would have been a failure.
Yeah, but he didn't drown. He had no choice.
But he would have done if the martial arts champion had wanted him to.
But he didn't. He kept on fighting. You see, and that's the whole point. I'm trying to get at.
Okay.
Do you see what I mean? So to answer your second question.
Yeah,
it is probably based on fear and laziness.
No, don't say laziness. Don't say laziness.
It's true, though.
No, because you could be the hardest working person in the company and know that you're never going to strike out on your own. That might be fear, but it's not laziness. It's not laziness. It's not. It's fear.
The same thing. Fear and laziness are the same thing.
Fear and laziness are not the same thing.
They are. They do.
And failure is not a choice. I mean, these are just self-evident truths.
Well, it depends. Depends what you see as failure. If you see it's not getting it right first time, that's not a failure. At least you're trying. A failure is someone who gives up. So that's what I see a failure as.
But you give up after the company's gone under. You can't carry on running a company that's failed.
No, but you carry on doing something else. You can't. Depends on how you define a failure.
Yeah. All right.
Do you see what I mean?
No.
You don't understand.
Well, I know what determination is, Lewis, but I don't think you understand the difference between the entrepreneurial spirit and determination. So I can write a book, but I would never start a publishing company. I can present a radio show, but I would never start my own radio station. Some of my mates have started a radio station. They've done it, and it's going brilliantly well. I'd never have done that. It's not my skill set, but it's more than a skill set. It's an impulse. They might have brought me in on the ground floor and said, we'll give you some equity. I'd have become an entrepreneur in that moment. That we'll give you some equity because we know you can do this and not everybody could, and we'll take care of that, and you do. But I wouldn't have been the spark. It wouldn't have been the thing. It wouldn't have been the spirit of the thing. But I do understand what you're saying, and I'm really grateful for the insights. But I think there's another little dimension here. Another little dimension. Etty's in Kentish Town. Etty, what would you like to say?
So you just said it's that other little thing.
Yes.
Above and beyond the sort of, not what you were doing when you were younger, because that's fun and you didn't have a huge amount of risk involved there.
Yeah.
And when you said you considered starting an advertising agency, or what you just said now,
10 minutes.
You said
yes.
Someone else has to do all of the business.
Yes.
All of the other stuff.
Yes.
And the difficulty in running a company, there is so much stuff ancillary to your idea, to the actual business itself. So you have to have such belief or confidence in that idea, and that might be because you think it's a brilliant idea, that might be because you think it will make you loads of money, that might be because you think you're going to be the most in control.
You've already made a leap there. from one part of the population to another. Because I have brilliant ideas every 20 minutes, Etty. You listen to the programme. It's a miracle, some of the stuff that comes out of my mouth. But I would never, ever, ever move to the next level and think, I should turn that into a business. Fishages.
Exactly.
Fishages was one of my brilliant ideas. A sausage, but fish.
Mm-hmm.
Fishages.
Sounds tasty.
Yeah,
like
fishages.
A goujon.
Yeah. No, kind of like a goujon, kind of like a fish finger, but a sausage, a fishage. Fishages. I had a brilliant idea. Fishages. Never going to get it into production. Never going to be the one to bring fishages to the masses.
Because you don't have either the risk appetite to do so. You're happy enough in your current job, or you don't want to deal with all of the other stuff aside from fishages. You don't want to.
There's something else there, though. It's not just all of those things, because they might. What if it's not?
If you really believed in it, you'd have got rid of those things. Wouldn't have mattered.
I did really believe it. Yeah. Why do you sound so surprised? What do you know about food production?
Sorry, that is a very fair point. Nothing.
Thank you. Trust me, fishages. You can have that.
But I think why the entrepreneurial spirit's being, in inverted commas, crushed, is there is, at the very least, the perception that the barriers to it are increasing. Whether or not they are, I'm not. I wait to see what this legislation says. I think for a lot of sort of entrepreneurs, it wouldn't actually.
53% of working age adults said fear of failure was putting them off starting a business, and 10 years ago, or 8 years ago in 2016, that figure was 35%. Good Lord. So it's really...
I think that's financial.
Yes, because the cost of living has changed so much. You can't afford to risk the steady income.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Everything that goes with it as well. The sleepless nights, the worrying about employing someone, and you're then responsible for them as well. There's a lot to worry about.
Yes, there is. And there is the difference between entrepreneurial spirit, because I can understand, because what you're describing, what we're discussing now, is people making calculations. They're doing cost-benefit ratios, and they're concluding, no, I'm too worried about the risk here, but I would have done it 10 years ago. So something has changed. The entrepreneurial spirit is still there. The people that actually get to the point of making the calculations and conclude that it's too scary to do, they've got it. And that I think is where your contribution started, because I would never even make that. I wouldn't even get to the point where I'm making the calculations, where I'm jotting down what it might. It just doesn't go there. It'd be like me trying to play football professionally. I have not got the skills, and that's the entrepreneurial spirit. It's more than skills. It's what do you do, if you don't mind me asking?
That's all right. I run a company. It was a family company, so I'm half.
I could do that.
Yes and yes.
Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. I could inherit. I'd be fine for inherit. If anyone wants to give me a company, I'd absolutely have a crack at running it.
Yeah, but there becomes a point where it's still more difficult to do that.
I'm teasing you a bit.
Just have a job.
I'm teasing you a bit, and I'd also need mornings off, obviously, to do the radio show.
As I do to listen.
Perfect answer. 11:47 is the time. Neil Basu, you heard yesterday we took a call. We had extraordinary calls when we were discussing the Chris Cabba case, and I call it the Chris Cabba case because I'm not going to say the name of the police officer involved. It's just a petty little decision of mine. I don't think it's petty, but I appreciate it in the great scheme of things. It's largely meaningless. We had a commander of armed police ring in. They don't actually carry weapons themselves necessarily, but they deploy the officers who do. He's had that job. He was the commander of armed policing in 2014, in charge of armed police response when he was an assistant commissioner to the Metropolitan Police, also, of course, a former head of counter-terrorism. And I just really want to hear what he thinks about this. I've had the pleasure of sitting down with Neil for a length of time when we were recording a Full Disclosure podcast, and he is one of those people that can restore your faith in the police service if you are ever at risk of feeling it fracture a little. It is 11:48.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 11:51. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where it is, I think, almost the first day this week where we haven't turned our attention to events at the Old Bailey, and of course events that preceded them, when the criminal Chris Cabba was shot by a member of the Metropolitan Police Service, someone whose name I am endeavouring not to mention, although I appreciate I can't expect everybody else to abide by that, and it is a little bit, in the great scheme of things, pointless. But I wanted to talk to Neil Basu about it, former head of counter-terrorism policing at the Metropolitan Police, and also former firearms commander, because you feel, I mean, you've used the phrase, Neil, thank you, always a pleasure to see you. You've used the phrase crisis of confidence amongst armed policing. We'll get on to that. But you do subscribe to the idea that the system as it stands before yesterday's announcement on anonymity wasn't working as well as it could.
Yeah, good morning, James. Thank you for inviting me on. I watched this unfold from the moment the shooting happened to the charging decisions to the trial with an incredibly heavy heart, because I've been here before. So when I was head of armed policing in 2014, after the public inquiry into the shooting of Azelle Rodney, and then preparing for the inquest into the shooting of Mark Duggan, we've seen all of this before. And my view is we'll keep seeing this unless we treat this, government, all the agencies involved, the police and the public, as a watershed moment. And why do I say that? I mean, this case is layer on layer of tragedy. So it doesn't matter who Chris Cabba was. His family didn't choose to be put in this position, and they are angry, frustrated, grieving, bereaved, very difficult to think rationally at this point. And most importantly, along with a lot of their family, friends and supporters in the black community, do not trust policing at all. And what they will think is that when someone loses their life at the hands of the state, particularly at the hands of the police, their presumption will be that the police have done something unlawful or have committed murder. And I've seen that and investigated that many times in my career. The second tragedy is that, along with their lack of confidence in the police and the criminal justice system, our armed police colleagues, who do the hardest job in policing and do it more professionally than any other jurisdiction in the world, and I've worked with almost every other liberal democratic institution around the world, also lack faith in the very system that is designed to hold them to account. And those two things are a huge tragedy and undermine our safety as citizens. So we have to think we need our armed police to have confidence in the system that holds them to account. They're not asking, and there's been a lot of talk about them being asking to be dealt with somehow differently from a normal member of the public. Before they're ever allowed to pick up a weapon, they sit in a classroom and they learn the law. And part of that law is exactly what they can and can't do. And most importantly, their personal individual accountability for pulling that trigger. And every year in the United Kingdom, thousands of those operations take place. And every year, if the trigger is pulled more than 4 or 5 times, it's an unusual year. Yes. So in the year that Chris Cabba was shot, there were 18,500 firearms operations in the United Kingdom. The trigger was pulled, I think, 4 or 5 times. We've got to remember that and put that in perspective when we're talking about what happened. And the other tragedy is, of course, both of them will be waiting to go through a coronial process. Both the family and the family of the armed officer will be waiting to go through 2 more processes, a coronial process and an understanding of whether he's going to be charged with gross misconduct. So I'd like people to understand why the black community feels the way they do and the need for policing to build trust and confidence so they don't feel that way when these things happen, and the way the armed officer is feeling, because look behind the badge. These are human beings who are put themselves in extraordinary situations on our behalf and have to pay a very heavy price.
And thank you for that. And what then would you see as relatively straightforward ways to improve the situation? Let's focus on the police officer. Let's focus on, because I think as things stand, he had to go to trial effectively. It would have been very difficult for some of the reasons you've alluded to. And the CPS makes its decision. There's a lot of moving parts. And anonymity has been introduced into the equation, of course, in the last 24 hours. But I think you believe that, as with pursuit drivers, as with sometimes police officers, if they are doing their job, then they shouldn't be running the risk of prosecution.
Yes, and I think that's correct. And when you said that he had to go to trial, that I could debate that with you. So one of the practical measures that's taken place, and this is about treating police officers the same as a normal member of the public, is when the IOPC are investigating this, and I'm a very experienced detective and investigator, they're the only people who know all of the evidence in the case when they decide to put it before the Crown Prosecution Service. I know the unit within the Crown Prosecution Service because it deals with serious crime and counter-terrorism. It's full of the best lawyers in the CPS, generally making good decisions. But there is an argument that the threshold test for sending what looks like an investigation into an event to the Crown Prosecution Service is set at a much lower level for police officers acting in the line of duty. Now, I understand why the public might think, well, police officers have to be held to a much higher standard than the rest of us. I happen to agree with that. They absolutely should. But when they are acting in accordance with their training, their direction, their experience, and they are not deliberately departing from their training or tactics, they are not effectively acting unlawfully, then a decision to prosecute someone in those circumstances is questionable in my view.
Yes, I understand why. Is that threshold that you refer to as being perhaps worryingly low, is that a formalised criteria, or is that just human agency? It is a formalised criteria. So
it has become formalised, but it's a policy decision. It's not a legal decision.
But under that policy decision, the trial became inevitable, in a sense.
Well, potentially. I mean, I wasn't.
I get that. But the other bit is how do you prove that you have only been following your training? If you discharge your weapon and if somebody dies as a consequence, who decides whether or not the training has been completely adhered to?
That's the whole purpose of a post-incident investigation when a state takes a life. So the investigators gather all of the evidence, they put it before lawyers. Lawyers decide whether or not an unlawful act has taken place. And in gathering that evidence, you would look at the tactics, how the tactics were executed. Unfortunate word, I'm sorry. But how the actual operation took place. You would be looking for witnesses, you'd be looking for CCTV, and in this case, we actually have body-worn cameras. So police officers, again, trying to be as accountable as possible to the public and as open as possible, armed officers wearing cameras during you will look at all of that and you'll put that before a lawyer and a lawyer will make the decision. But there is a tremendous amount of politicization and media pressure. Not just that, those of us who bear the scars of multiple riots in our history where an event has triggered tremendous community tension, there will be a tremendous amount of pressure on the decision makers who are there as safeguards for us as the public, safeguards for the police, in terms of making decisions, the independent bodies of the police watchdog, the independence of the Crown Prosecution Service. They are there to make objective decisions, not work under the pressure of media and politics, but that does happen.
Easier said than done. I just want to pin down who would do that, who would decide whether the officer has adhered to their training, because you've described the process that we've gone through in the Chris Cabba killing, and this is, in your view, suboptimal. So is there a new body that would make that calculation on the relationship between action and training?
No, well, in my service, I've worked with 3 iterations of the police watchdog, and on every single occasion there have been elements within that organisation who've been excellent and elements that have been poor.
Oh, okay.
No one benefits more from a professional, well-resourced, highly experienced, brilliant investigation into their actions than the police. Independently done. So that's what needs to happen. It's the senior investigating officer of the police watchdog who can make those decisions. And in fact, I heard the Home Secretary in the House yesterday, her usual very balanced and professional view, putting some clear practical measures in place, which will hopefully make this a much easier process for armed officers, much easier for policing in general, and much easier for the public to understand why these things should happen. And you started this with anonymity.
Yes.
That is probably the most contentious of those issues.
Do you welcome it?
I do, and I was if I was still the commander of armed policing in 2022 when this happened, I would have been making a strenuous case for anonymity. I mean, so I've worked in the arena that we're talking about here. I worked as a homicide investigator, the SIO for a murder squad in Operation Trident, when we worked with the black community alongside them, trying to arrest very dangerous armed criminals. And during that time, my teams, and in fact my lawyers prosecuting people for murder, received death threats.
Yes.
It is not common, but it is by no means rare for police officers and lawyers prosecuting to receive threats. When you're dealing with high-end violent crime, both in the organised crime space and counter-terrorism, that is going to happen. And I have the utmost respect for the judge who made the decision not to give this police officer anonymity. I've worked with that judge. I know who he is. He has very high values and very high integrity, but I think it was the wrong decision. And I think it's the wrong decision because he made it on the basis that when he was making the decision, there was no imminent threat to the police officer. So the police could not provide an actual threat at that time. The minute you name that police officer,
everything changes.
That threat will crystallize. So it's a ridiculous catch-22.
It seems to be. And you reminded us at the outset that police officers are human beings too. There are fathers and daughters and sons and sisters beneath the uniform, inside the uniform. We forget sometimes that judges are too. I mean, people make decisions, fallible human beings make decisions, as you've stressed, with the best of intentions and with the most integrity, but they can just get stuff wrong. I won't detain you for much longer because I'm late for the news.
I think you got it right by the letter of the law.
Yes, precisely.
Wrong by what was right.
Yeah, I do. I didn't realise we were going to do philosophy today, Neil, but it's always welcome. So I think you then leave yourself open to the accusation, for want of a better word, that you don't think it's possible for a murder to take place if training is adhered to.
It wouldn't be murder.
No.
If you look at the definition of murder,
it would be lawful killing.
It would be a lawful killing. What you'd be looking at as an investigator is whether there was any recklessness or gross negligence in the active action of the officer, and that would be manslaughter if it was proven, but it wouldn't be murder. And you have to look at the definition of murder to understand why. And
I think the jury asked very early in this case to have the definition of unlawful killing clarified, and some of the expert opinion is that the acquittal became more or less inevitable at that point, 2 or 3 days into the trial. But I digress. I just want to do one more thing, because when you were talking about death threats there, my mind ran to some of the lawyers who work in the field of immigration law, actually, and some of the targets that have been painted on their back by very prominent politicians, up to and including former Home Secretaries. Is there not a danger that anonymity now, once it's in the open, it can extend to non-firearm cases? It can extend to lots of other areas of policing. I know I'm talking about the law, but just would anonymity not also apply potentially in other areas?
You have to look at the risk assessment and the threat. Yeah. And armed policing is a very unique position to put yourself in terms of reprisal and threat. But can I leave you with the thought that actually the Home Secretary did address yesterday, but there were a lot of black and Asian MPs in that room. Very few people in the House that day, disappointingly.
Yes, I noticed.
Most all of them supporting the bravery of policing. That was good to see. But I'm also unique in that, I was a firearms commander, but I was also the most senior officer of colour in the country. So strangely enough, I can see it from both sides. Yeah. Just like Dal Babu, my ex-colleague and friend who does a lot of media commentary. We have an unusual perspective. And what the Home Secretary was also saying is policing also has a responsibility not to have treated the black community in the way it has done for decades, to the point where they do not trust the system or the actions. And when we're a long way away from that. And she was talking about challenging policing to understand, the race action plan, the plans that they brought about to improve black confidence in policing and the criminal justice system. I hope she's going to make sure that is inspected carefully for every chief constable in this country. And that also has to happen.
Yeah, and so some of what you've alluded to there is why we're so grateful for your time and attention today, because as you say, that dual perspective is close to unique. How's the book coming along?
Oh, it's finished.
Is it all done and dusted?
Yeah, it'll be published in April next year.
Well, you must come in and talk to us when that happens.
Well, I'd be delighted to do that. Thank you for the offer.
I look forward to it. Neil Basu, thank you very much, as always, for your insights. A former Assistant Commissioner in the BAT, in charge of armed police response, and as you just heard, very almost uniquely qualified to knit together the two elements of this conversation that we began on Tuesday morning by describing as it being possible for two things to be true at the same time. The police service can have a long and ugly record of racism, and the killing of Chris Cabba can have absolutely nothing to do with it. It's extraordinary how many people are upset by that simple observation, but I guess that's the nature of simple observations sometimes, isn't it? Mystery Hour next. A lot of you very cross that we've postponed Mystery Hour, but come on. It was important.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12. Crikey, Mystery 50 minutes, Mystery 49 minutes, and counting. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll just wait for the bumby-dumby-dum business in the background to end, and then we'll just kick off straight away. So I need callers on the screen early doors. I need to remind you of the number. I'm not going to give you any of the usual gubbins. I'll just remind you that you can win a board game by making my favourite contribution of the day. And the terms and conditions for that are at lbc.co.uk. And you can find out more about the board game, which Angie held up as evidence of my own entrepreneurial spirit, somewhat over-generously, at mysteryhour.co.uk. But there is the detail that you need. How much is left of the Dumpty-Dumpty-Dum? 17 seconds. Oh, it's a bit longer, isn't it? It's a bit longer than you realised. Yeah, it's longer than I thought. Normally I get towards the end of it and I'm wondering what to say next. Well, I didn't have that problem today. Simon is in Beckenham. Question or answer, Simon?
It's a question, James. Good
Carry
morning.
on. Thank you, mate. Carry on.
We use the description first world and we use the description third world. Can you guess what the question is?
Where's the second world?
Indeed.
I think. No, I'm not going to go in on it.
Really?
Completely.
You sure?
Well,
Final answer, James?
Final answer. I can't phone a friend. So yeah, no, it's all right. What and where is the second world?
Indeed.
Yeah, I like it a lot. But I think something to do with obviously budget and development, but no, it's not there. If it's not there, it's not there. Thank you, Simon. Good question. 11 minutes after 12 is the time. John is in Edinburgh. John, question or answer?
Question, James.
Carry on, John.
Has the average wind speed over the British Isles increased over the past 50 years?
Why'd you ask?
Because it's getting more windy, it seems to me.
Is that your anecdotal evidence, is that it is getting gustier?
Yes, I mean, since a child, things have always been windy at times, but there just seems to be a lot more of it these days.
I mean, it'd be quite easy. Someone will know, I suppose. You could have looked it up, this one, but I like the fact that you've rather put your future in the hands of Mystery Hour listeners.
Thank you.
Of whom,
yes,
of course,
I think they're great.
Well, they're on now more than ever, of course.
Yes,
but I don't like to. I don't want to labour the point. So, what is it? Is it windier? Has it got windier in the course of your adult life?
And yours, yes.
And mine, yes. Well, no, I was only 50 years ago.
That's true.
So I wouldn't. But let's find out. And we mean the whole of the country, not just Edinburgh. 12 is the time. So where and what is the second world? So we know what a first world country is. We know what a third world country is. And is it getting windier? I like that question. Do you think it's getting windier? James is in Tunbridge. James, question or answer?
I've got a question for you, James.
Kai, carry on.
I don't know if you noticed, but September was quite damp.
It's getting windier as well, isn't it?
Well, exactly. And during the weather we had, occasionally we had some sun. And when we had sun and rain together, we had rainbows. And I saw a fantastic one day. It was very striking, very vivid.
Yes.
And above the rainbow was a blue sky, and below the rainbow was a blue sky. But the one above the rainbow was much darker blue than the one below the rainbow, which was a lighter blue. And I'm just wondering, how does that happen?
I mean, are you sure that you wouldn't have had gradations of blueness in the absence of the rainbow?
Quite sure, because it followed the arc of the rainbow.
It did, completely. So it was dark blue practically at ground level.
The other way around. It was lighter below the rainbow and darker above the rainbow.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I hadn't finished. At ground level on the outside of the rainbow.
Yes.
Really? So it was like a massive dark blue archway with a rainbow fringing the edges.
Yeah, I'm not saying completely. No, dark blue. It was a lighter shade of blue than the other side.
Procol Harum song. Whoosh, straight over Keith's head, that one. He's a DJ. I shall try to find out for you. And is this the only time you've witnessed this, or does this happen on other rainbows?
No, I had seen it before, but I just thought I'm going to keep that one in the pocket and try and get it on.
It'll have something to do with the sun, will it? Probably.
I would have thought so.
We shall find out for you. Why is the sky bluer on the outside fringe of a rainbow than it is inside the rainbow? 0345 6060 973. Good Lord, is that the time?
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 17 after 12. I'm simultaneously delighted and disappointed by the number of people listening to this programme who thought that John in Edinburgh's question about wind was an opportunity to do fart jokes. I said simultaneously disappointed and disgusted. It's the quantity, really. There's no quality at all. But the quantity of it was quite... I can't really complain. I can't be kind of schoolboy humour and then criticise others. So that was one of the questions. Is it getting windier? Why is the sky on each side of the rainbow a different shade of blue? And what and where are the second world countries? Graham's in Durham. Graham, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on.
Why do we sing in the shower? It makes no sense.
We don't.
We do. Loads of people feel compelled to sing in the shower.
I actually know this.
Oh, okay.
I think I do.
All right. Because we don't sing on the toilet, do we?
Well, speak for yourself. I'm forever
not usual.
blowing bubbles. No, but you've got other things on your mind, and your muscles are deployed doing other things when you're on the carsy, aren't they?
Well, yeah, but from an evolutionary point of view, you're naked, you're wet, you don't have
there's no evolution.
And you make a horrible noise, really loud, and all the lions can come and eat you.
But it's not it's not a horrible noise, and also you wouldn't do it in the savannah, would you? You're doing it in a closed shower, and the reason why people like to sing in the shower is because it sounds better. The acoustics are really good.
Oh, you think it's acoustics?
Yeah, of course it is.
Well, why don't we sing on the toilet then?
Because you're busy doing other businesses. You're spending a penny.
You're busy doing other stuff in the shower.
No,
as
you're
well.
not.
You're
No,
washing your
you're
hair.
not. You've got ages. You're in the shower. You're not. It's a leisure time in the shower. It's not leisure. It's not leisure time
Okay,
on
in
the
the bath,
toilet.
people don't sing in the bath, except for maybe Alex in Clockwork Orange. But most people don't sing in the bath.
I think they might actually. But again, it would be. I mean, the shower is just a moment of acoustics, and a lot of people are in shower cubicles where the acoustics are going to be even more striking, aren't they? What do you sing? What do you sing in the shower? What do you sing in the shower?
Whatever stupid song is stuck on repeat in my head. So it might be Sabrina Carpenter, or it might be ABBA, or I don't know. Whatever's stuck in my head. It might be Mbop by Hanson if my brain decides it hates me one morning.
Have you ever heard Istanbul? Not
Yes,
Constantinople. Yes.
Well, wasn't originally by them, but yes.
Who was it originally by? Is it originally like a school song?
No, it was a band in the 1950s,
Was it?
American bands. Someone could ring up and answer that
I
question.
sing that in the shower. Since you asked. I love that song. I
answer the
can't
question
listen.
about the Second World if you want.
No, you're not allowed to do that.
Save
Sorry.
someone's phone bill.
No,
calling you up.
not
All
allowed
right,
to do
all
that.
right.
You can't
Well,
listen
say
to
it.
that song, Istanbul, not Constantinople, without smiling. You can't listen to it without
Yes,
smiling.
it's true. I'm smiling now that
You
you're
see,
talking about
that's
it.
that's
It's a
the
great
song to sing in the shower. But I'll leave your question on the board, Graham. Why
Thank
do
you,
we?
thank you.
But I don't know. You'll get a better answer than mine. Acoustics, innit? Why do we sing in the shower and not on the? Forgive me, lavatory. Ollie is in Holmes Chapel in Cheshire. Ollie, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on, Ollie.
The term Second World is a pretty niche and not often used anymore term to describe sort of post-World War II, going into Cold War, Russia, China, that kind of axis, because they weren't third world countries and they weren't first world countries. And then sort of more present times, that's been recategorized as kind of emerging markets, so India, Bangladesh, Indian subcontinent, etc.
Well, they would still be technically referred to as second world countries.
No, not anymore. So it went out of fashion.
So it's almost a question of self-sufficiency, is it? So a third world country needs foreign help. A first world country is relatively comfortable, and a second world country is scraping by.
That's a pretty good way of describing it. Actually, it was they were self-sufficient. They had domestic policy. They had foreign policy. It was flawed. It didn't work, but they didn't really fit into either category because they were also, Russia specifically and China, a global superpower. So,
qualifications?
Degree in politics and international relations.
Oh, yeah, I like that. Well, put to good use. And a round of applause for your troubles. No, thank you. That was lovely. So we've done that one. I hope Simon's happy. I am. 12:21 is the time. Harry's in Epsom. Harry, question or answer?
It's a question, please, James.
Carry on, Harry.
Hopefully, you or one of your 1.5 million listeners
can help. How many?
1.5, isn't it?
1.5? What? The largest audience in the history of LBC on a non-breakfast show? That's just unbelievable. Sorry, I got this. That's very hard. I'll have to check the statistics there, Harry. Carry on. Thank you.
All right, so listen, a friend and I, a colleague and I were in Dubai recently for work reasons. I travel quite often for work, right? And when we book hotels, you have to filter 2-star, 3-star.
Well, speak for yourself, mate. I'm going 5 or 6 personally, but we've all got our crosses to bear. Carry on.
And that is the question, right? Who are the star people?
Oh, I know this.
Right?
The star people.
Yeah.
That's a great phrase. Who are the star people? That sounds like a sort of 1970s sci-fi television series where all of the props looked like they were going to collapse. And it's the star people. I am Gareth, leader of the star people. I love that. You had guidebooks.
Okay.
But I know that the stars used to be awarded when I was a child. It was the AA and the RAC, so it was the motoring organisations that awarded the stars to the hotels.
Okay, but in random country Kenya, there is no RAC.
Oh, you mean in other countries?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So is there an international star people?
Yeah, so what defines 4-star, 5-star, right? Because I was in a hotel and I was getting annoyed that there was someone in the lobby that's trying to sell like camels and stuff. And I said, this shouldn't be a 4-star hotel.
Trying to sell what?
Like figurines of camels and cheap fragrance and stuff like
camels?
That. And yeah.
Camels?
Yes.
CAMELS?
Yes, camels.
Camels? Well, as in the beasts?
Yes, he was selling figurines of camels.
Oh, you mean like a camel ride? He wasn't selling you a camel. He was selling you a ride.
Like tiny figurines of camels.
Oh, bloody hell. I thought you were selling camels in the I thought, crikey, that sounds like a 6-star hotel. That's a good...
No. So it was a bit annoying that he did that every day.
Like a hawker. Like a hawker.
Yeah,
and you thought, I'm paying good money. Exactly. This is a 4-star hotel. There shouldn't be street traders in the lobby.
Inside, yes.
Yes. Michelin do the fancy stars, but that's international. So Michelin do the really fancy ones for the restaurants. I had Michel Roux in yesterday for a forthcoming full disclosure. I'd love it when people are every bit as lovely as you hope they will be when you finally get to meet them. But that doesn't apply to... so you go to a 4-star hotel in Africa or a 4-star hotel in Scotland, and are they going to be judged by the same criteria, and are those awards made by the same body? I bet they're not, I bet you've stumbled across something there. So how can you have any faith at all in the star system? I love that. Where are you going next, Harry?
Bill, where am I next week? In Dubai.
Oh, well, be careful. I just mean travel carefully, and be careful for people selling little camel figurines. I don't know if would you get that? You wouldn't get that in Dubai, would you?
Well, you don't know, right? Because nothing stops you from building a hotel and saying it's a 7-star.
Well, no, that's what I want to find. I don't know, because Dubai is the place where you have like these new numbers of stars. I've never been, but you read about it, don't you? It's a 7-star hotel. What do you do? What's the difference between a 6-star hotel and a 7-star hotel? And if it applies in Dubai, does it also apply in Dundee? 0345 6060 973. Thank you, Harry. Georgina is in Wimbledon. Georgina, question or answer?
It's a question, James.
Carry on, Georgina.
I'd like to know why is a tea towel called a tea towel?
As opposed to just a little towel or a kitchen towel or a...
Yeah, kitchen towel, yeah.
Why is it called a tea towel? Well, I mean, it would... It's a tea, a dish. So traditionally, you'd dry your dishes with it. Right?
Yes.
If you were washing your dishes in the sink, and your dishes would be called a tea set, I think, wouldn't they? Or is that a dinner set? Tea set? No, you're not going to buy that. You're not buying that, are you?
No.
Tea towel. Why is it a tea towel?
Yeah, because when I think of tea, I think of tea bag.
Yes.
So I don't understand what you've got to do.
No, nor do I.
Nor
do I. A tea towel. A tea towel. Sometimes I get these they're like riddles, and the answer comes to me while I just sort of blather on aimlessly with whoever's rung in this case you, Georgina. But I'm not feeling any movement at the moment.
Right.
I'm not feeling any stirrings.
Maybe someone will.
A tea towel. It's your tea service, your tea set. You're drying the dishes at tea time, but then you've got to dry the dishes at dinner time and breakfast time and lunch time.
Exactly.
Tea towel, tea time, tea towel. No, I've got nothing. I'll find out for you. All right.
Thank you, James.
No, thank you, Georgina. Why is a tea towel called a tea towel and not a something else towel? The time now is 12:27. I've got time for Russell in Lanark. Russell, question or answer?
It's a question, James.
Carry on.
The question is, why do people, when they sneeze, even normally quiet people, erupt such a loud noise? My wife is a perfect example. She is the quietest person alive, yet people ring the MOD looking for a low fly pass when she sneezes.
And she doesn't have to.
Well,
if she was in charge,
she always does.
If she was at a funeral, she'd be able to do the like that, wouldn't she?
Yeah, but it's still loud.
Because
even then.
Well, I think it's really enjoyable. It's going to be part of the answer. I read once, and I was a schoolboy at the time, so I noticed things like this a little bit more keenly than I do now. I read once that a sneeze was 1/7 of an orgasm.
Interesting turn of events.
But, well, you weren't expecting that, were you? So if you do 7 on the trot, I'll leave the rest to your imagination. I've no idea whether that's... But the louder it is, perhaps the more enjoyable it is.
I don't know, but think about, obviously, people have actually thrown their backs out sneezing.
Yeah,
so
that's
clearly,
true. That's true.
Not so great then.
No, but that's probably more likely to happen when you're holding it in.
Back.
Yeah, holding it back and do it like. So I do. Do you go loud or not? On the sneezing, don't worry about the other thing.
Not as loud as my wife, I can assure you.
Stop showing off, Russell. So I do, and I do loud sneezes, and all of my family say, "God, why do you have to be so loud when you're sneezing?" And then they do as well. So I think I just sneeze more often than they do, so it's more noticeable. But why do we do it so loudly? You don't need to. You can always just go. On the tube this morning, I sneezed. And there's quite a lot of COVID around at the moment. I don't know whether you've noticed. And so I'm conscious of people being worried about me sneezing on the tube, and I'm doing it very, very subtly. If I'd been at home, the same sneeze would have been Richter scale stuff, because it feels great to really clean the pipes. That's my theory, but I'm not going to get a round of applause for that. It's coming out to 12:30. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Questions that still need answers include, is it getting windier? Why is the sky bluer on the outside of a rainbow than it is on the inside of a rainbow? Why do we sing in the shower? Stars. Who gives hotels stars internationally? Why is a tea towel called a tea towel? And why do we make so much noise when we sneeze? Lucinda Horsley's here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
32 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Martin makes a very important point in Plymouth. He says, "Afternoon, James. Not only are the acoustics better in the shower, you've also got the shower head to use as a microphone." That's probably it might well be part of the answer. Why do so many of us sing in the shower? And before I return to Mystery Hour proper, Ovi and Terry up next, something quite strange has happened. And I feel I should share it with you. I think that the show has done some time travel. Something has happened in the space-time vortex in the last 20 minutes, because you heard Russell's question about sneezing, right? And that only ended just before the news, didn't it? All right? You heard that. And it ended at about 12. I think we went about 10 seconds early for once to the news. So we crossed to Lucinda at about 12:29 and 50 seconds, give or take, right? So why did Michael send me this at 12:15 p.m. today? I have been sneezing quite a lot the last few months. Anything can set me off. A change in temperature, walking into a different room, someone's deodorant, even a change in lighting levels. And it's not a reply. Let me check. It's not a reply to anything that I've posted this morning, which is largely boasts about my radar figures. Why? It's not a reply to anything? What? How did that happen? How is he referencing a call that hadn't happened when he sent the message to me? Whoa. Spooky, yeah? That's right. Well, I grant you, it's more likely he's time travelling than me, but you'd have thought he'd have remembered to reset his Twitter, wouldn't you? Before sending a message and giving the whole game away. 12:34 is the time. Ovi's in Tottenham. Ovi, question or answer?
Hi, James. First time caller here.
Welcome.
It's, thanks. It's an answer to the shower thingy.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think above all, it's confidence, James.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, because of the acoustics, but more often it's like no one can hear me.
Because of the noise of the shower is drowning out, so you don't think it... Yeah. So that's why you wouldn't do it on the lavatory.
Absolutely. So no one will laugh, and I feel more confident if I say in the shower.
And do you?
I do, and I still do. No, not because of that particular reason, because I've gone past that point. But I used to do it for that reason, because people would laugh.
What do you mean you've gone past that point?
Kind of. I've got more courage now, and
you're not worried about other people hearing you sing.
Absolutely.
Istanbul, not Constantinople. It is Yeah, you could be right. Actually, well, I suppose it depends where you are as well. I don't think I'd be worried about my own family hearing me sing, but certainly when I was at boarding school, I wouldn't have wanted people to hear me singing. So maybe it does. So combination of acoustics. Confidence
and soundproofing,
soundproofing and the soundproofing nature of the shower. So even if people can hear you, because all you can hear is the roaring of the shower, then you think that you are quiet.
Yeah, exactly. Just like when you're talking with the headphones on, you talk louder. You don't even know you talk louder, but you just talk it.
That's why I only have one earphone on. I always have one ear uncovered. I don't know if you've ever seen me in the studio, have you? But I always have one ear uncovered.
Oh, yeah, I've seen you online. Yes.
It's like a little trademark, but there is a reason for it. So I hear you different. I'm going to give you a round of applause. Qualifications? We'll make something up.
Just high school, man. I'm a DJ, but I'm not sure if that matters.
Yeah, of course it matters. What kind of music do you play?
Oh, everything from the 60s, 70s to drum and bass, everything, pretty much.
Blimey, that's quite a set. Have a round of applause on me. You got any gigs this weekend?
Not this weekend, but soon.
Good. Well, good luck. 12:36 is the time. Both DJ. I'm not a DJ. People call me a DJ. I'm not a DJ. I don't play any records. I just break them. Paul's in Swansea. Paul, question or answer? Come on.
Question, James.
That was good. That was funny. Carry on, Paul.
Over the last 4 years, James, my mortgage has nearly doubled to £2,000.
I'm sorry.
I'd like to know who is benefiting by that extra £1,000. Who is trousering that money?
Yeah, I mean, you want names?
No, well, institution names, yeah.
Because it's, I mean, you know who it is, really, don't you? You know that some people are earning interest on their money and some people are paying it. And the people earning it will be benefiting from the rate rises that have seen you suffer.
Yes. So can I assume from that the extra money that I'm paying is going into shareholders' pockets?
You mean at the actual banks?
Yes.
Or building society? I don't know that it does. Well, it's more likely to be people who've got large deposits, isn't it?
Quite possibly. Or does it go into the treasury coffers?
No, it doesn't go into the treasury coffers because there'll be some taxes involved, but it's a private transaction that you have with your lender that is contingent upon base rates, interest rates, but the lenders will also be will also have money on deposit. I mean, isn't that just how banking works? Is that I put a ton of money in the bank and you borrow it and I get some of the interest that you pay and the bank keeps some. So the bank will keep some of it, obviously. So that bit will end up with shareholders and some of it will go to people who've got money on deposit with the bank.
And
in interest
doesn't
payments.
the Bank of England play a large part in this too, as they function as the lender of last resort?
Yeah, they underwrite, if you like, so to the point where if there was a massive run, then the Bank of England might step in. I mean, we both need someone a bit cleverer than I'm sounding at the moment, don't we, Paul?
Of course we do. Yes.
So I'll do my best, but yeah, I mean, it's the nature. That's why they're friends. You know what it translates at, don't it? It translates as something to do with death. It's like the death tax, the mortgage, if you translate it from the French. It's not a coincidence that. I'll try and find out for you. I hope it comes down again soon. Isn't there some good... I suppose you signed up for quite a long time, did you, when you renegotiated it?
Well, I didn't renegotiate it.
It was variable, was it?
As a result of interest rate hikes.
I see. So it wasn't a fixed rate. It was a variable rate. Well, we know it's all Liz Truss's fault. In the first instance, well, I say we. She doesn't understand that still, apparently, but I think everybody else does. But yeah, where does the money go? And so I like this. If Paul's mortgage has doubled and he's still only got one house, he's not getting more house for the mortgage payment. Where's the money gone? Who's got the money that it's gone up by. 0345 6060 973. Why do we make so much noise when we sneeze? Why is a tea towel called a tea towel? Who gives the stars to hotels? Quite a few of you are pointing out that the guy who messaged me about sneezing before the question of sneezing had ever been asked was probably Gareth from the Star People. You know what? He could be, couldn't it? Could be. Except his name's Michael. Maybe Michael is one of the Star People. Obert is in Halifax. Obert, question or answer?
Is a question, please. You all right?
Yeah, I'm all good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, yeah.
All right.
First time here.
Welcome. Where have you been? Why have you taken so long?
I like to do politics a lot, but I never get on.
I'm here every day.
Yeah, I never get on, yeah.
What, you ring in and they don't put you through?
They never do.
It's outrageous. Why have you been picking on Obert? Sounds lovely.
Yeah.
What's your question?
They never put me through. Yeah, my question is like, why is that like you, if I've got my company, I always say O'Brien and Sons.
Yeah.
Why do you never say O'Brien and daughters or Sunak and his daughters and all that?
I mean, weirdly, you do. You just don't see it very often. So companies these days with that have still got that in their title are likely to have gone back a long way. Do you see what I mean? They're likely to have their roots, say, pre-1950s, when sons would be much, much more likely to follow into the family business, and daughters, even if they did, would probably knock it on the head when they got married and started raising a family of their own. But I know for a fact I think there's an estate agent near me, which is And Daughters, and there is an undertaker in Norfolk, near where we go quite a lot. I almost remember the name of it, and that's an And Daughters as well, an undertaker that has an And Daughters. So I just think it happens much more often. Would you be more likely to go to a company, to patronise a company that was O'Brien and Daughters than O'Brien and Sons? Because I think I might be. You sort of think, well, that's nice, isn't it?
Yeah, you just want to promote your, gender equality and all that stuff.
No, you should be doing it, but it just doesn't happen so much, and very few people are going to be setting up businesses. It takes us back to the second hour of the programme, but it does happen, just not as much. Obert, I think is the answer.
It's okay.
And my qualifications are that I've seen it, so you can't get any better qualifications than that. I just wish I could. Someone will text me the name of it in a minute. Give me some examples of businesses, please, that are better being And Daughters. 0345 6060 973 if you want to WhatsApp them. And of course, the echoes of the patriarchy as well, as Liz points out. It was the way that society was structured until relatively recently. I'll take that round of applause. Thank you, Keith. Hurrah. Martin is in Durham. Martin, question or answer?
Hi, James. I've got an answer.
Carry on, Martin.
I know why a tea towel is called a tea towel.
Why?
This is a story that was passed on from my grandma, who was a maid in a stately home in County Durham.
Gosh.
So it was initially it was a towel to wrap the teapot in. It was to keep the teapot warm before the tea cosy was the tea cosy was invented at the same time, but it was more for stately homes and posh people.
Well, you would, yes, you probably have had one. You could have had your own as well, but you would have a cloth that went over the tea towel to keep it toasty.
So it was called the tea towel,
and it would be the tea towel, the towel for the teapot. Makes really good sense when you think about it. And then
it was folded in a precise way. My grandma always folded the tea towel in a precise way that absolutely encompassed the whole of the teapot.
Really, there was an actual sort of origami style knack to it.
Yeah, exactly. It was, and that tea towel never ever got used for anything else apart from covering the teapot, or if she'd made any scones, the warmth of the teapot then covered the scones.
That'll do nicely. Oh, that sounds lovely, doesn't it? That makes perfect sense. Qualifications, your nan used to do it back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, my grandma used to do it, and she'd done it all of her life until she passed away.
Oh, how lovely. That she sort of carried those traditions. I hope you've carried them on, Martin.
We don't have a teapot. We've got Yorkshire tea.
one bag per mug. That's one of my favourite answers in a long time on Mystery Hour. Thank you, mate.
Fantastic.
That's really lovely. Have a round of applause.
Fantastic.
No, thank you
very much. Cheers, James.
Cheers, Martin. Someone's just moved into the lead in the race for the board game, but of course it's not over until it's over.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 12:47. Got quite a few to get through. There'll probably be a few left on the board when we finish. So questions that need answers. And I've got some phone lines free now. So if you can answer any of these, get your skates on. Has it got windier in the last 50 years? Why is the sky bluer on the outside of a rainbow than it is on the inside? Who awards stars to hotels? And it needs to be international. Is it the same organisation that does it in Africa that does it in Europe, for example? Why do we make so much noise when we sneeze? Or why do some people make so much noise when they sneeze? If Paul's mortgage has doubled in the last couple of years, where is the money going? And I think Obert was happy with his answer that you do have companies that are and daughters. But just in case he doesn't, we've got loads of examples coming in now. And I'll just read out a couple. You've got Dugard and Daughters. That's in Herne Hill, actually. There's also a rather good wine shop in Herne Hill called Wild and Lees, which I recommend wholeheartedly, with a full disclosure that it is run by my brother-in-law. I've got a nephew's example from Matt, who's in Chelford, an engineering company called Smith and Nephew. That's nice. K&J Libretto and Daughters is a butcher in southeast London. We've got lots of examples. Dugard and Daughters again. There's one in Earlsfield as well. So there it is. And they tend to be manual jobs historically, but not exclusively, Tracy explains. And so the daughters would have been less likely to want to follow Dad into plumbing or similar. I like this. This is lovely stuff. Dutch Imports and Daughters. Loads of examples. I have to be slightly careful. There's an estate agent called Lawson and Daughters. And there's a model shop in Basildon called Plus Daughters. I say I have to be slightly careful because you might send in something a bit indecent in the hope of catching me out. And it hasn't happened yet, but it probably will do one day. I like this. I've lost it now. There's an estate agent in Walsall called Jeff Something and Daughters, but it just clicked off my screen while I was trying to read it. Steve Wright and Daughter, loft conversions that you see around North Essex quite a lot, and a funeral director, quite a few funeral directors, which I guess fits in a bit with Tracy's point about it traditionally being a mark of a manual labouring firm. So a funeral director possibly does have more and daughters because of the nature of the work. But there is one there, Patrick Ryan and Daughter, funeral directors. I like this. Thank you. 10-1. Joe is in Leeds. Joe, question or answer?
I've got a question, James.
Yes.
Right, so basically I'm just wondering, why isn't there a law where motorists should never allow to touch alcohol when they're going to go behind the wheel?
Well, I mean, there didn't used to be any real laws at all.
Right.
So, and one day in the future, perhaps there might be. So it's just, we could just be on the spectrum, but one answer would be you can be over the limit the next morning. Does that answer your question? That doesn't really answer your question.
Well,
what about your medication or your mouthwash? You could get a reading even though you hadn't done anything naughty, or your judgment wasn't impaired at all.
Yeah, you know what it is, right? It's just obviously in the last probably 10 or 20 years. You know, we've seen a lot of motorists going out on the road.
Yeah.
And still, you know, even with like maybe a pint or anything, you know, we've seen them, you know, having a incident or whatsoever. And then obviously, you know.
Have we? How do you know? I mean, if they haven't broken the law, we'd never hear about it.
You never know, you know, how alcohol affects different people. Do you know what I mean?
So if you were in charge, you'd just say you're not allowed to drive if you've had a drink.
Well.
For how long? How long ago? Because you can't say one person has a drink, they're never allowed to drive for their whole life.
Some European countries do that.
No, they don't.
Some
not for your whole life. Not for your whole life. You've had one drink and then you're never allowed to drive.
No, that's not what I mean. That's not. No,
I know it's not. I'm teasing you. So how long is the gap between you being allowed to have a drink and you not being allowed to drive? Do you see what I mean? Because you can say, because you automatically, no one's allowed to drink in the car. I think that's an offence whether you're over the limit or not. So how long before getting in the car would you be allowed to have a drink under your glorious rule?
Well, I would probably say, you know, after you come out of a party or probably, you know, of a pub or whatsoever, and then next thing you know is, you know, you start your car, you feel sober to driving off, and then obviously, you know, you feel like you haven't been over the limit, you've only had, you know, one glass of wine or whatsoever, and then all of a sudden, you know, you go behind the wheel, you'll probably become, No,
I understand the question. I mean, there's two problems with it. Number one is the judgment of the law would be that the level of impairment is not sufficient to merit it as a crime. But also, how would you enforce it?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question.
Because you're only testing people if they've done something's gone wrong, and then you test them.
Mostly people, get stopped and not stopped, they get pulled over, usual road traffic,
I don't think, I like the question, and I'm spending too much time pontificating because I'm not going to get any answers, so I'll put it on the board.
Yeah.
I like the question, but I think the answer will be quite boring, if you see what I mean. It'll be quite a functional, prosaic, pragmatic answer. But it's on the board, Joe. Thank you. Why is anyone allowed ever to drink alcohol and drive? To drive while under the influence, however minimal, of alcohol. Steve's in Manchester. Steve, question or answer?
Answer, James.
Carry on.
Star ratings for hotels.
Oh, yes.
So in the UK, it's really straightforward. It's either the AA or the RAC.
That's what I said. Gosh.
That's the UK.
Yeah.
They have broadly similar standards. So if a hotel's 4-star AA, it's likely to be 4-star RAC, etc., etc., etc. As soon as you move out of the UK, it's the Wild West.
Is it really? So I could just open a hotel somewhere and say 5 stars.
You don't tend to find 7 or 8, 9-star hotels around Europe or the States. It tends to be the Middle East. It tends to be the super, super luxury hotels. And it's very simple. Somebody invests $1 billion in a 30-story hotel and calls it 7 stars.
Yes.
Then the next guy comes along and builds a 35-story hotel and he calls it 8 stars.
But if I'm travelling around France... If I'm travelling around France, how reliable generally would the star system be? If a sort of 4-star, 3-star chateau?
I don't know who the awarding bodies are in various European countries, but largely around Europe and the States, then you could rely on them. Less so in the States. Again, you've got some when you get into Manhattan or Florida or places like that. Again, it's all about superb luxury, and so people will just.
It all goes a little bit. Yeah, it all goes a little bit bonkers. Do we know what the highest recorded number of stars is? Self-awarded stars, probably.
I have absolutely no idea.
I mean, you could. It's a bit. Do you know what it's like? It's like razor blades, isn't it? It's like razor blade technology. Every couple of years, they just stick an extra blade on it and claim that it's much better than the last one. But at some point,
washing powder.
We're going to be walking around.
Sorry that our washing powder was always crap, but now it's really, really good.
Exactly. I don't know why you bought that old toot before we added the secret science, and now it's amazing. What are your qualifications?
Retired hotel manager.
Oh, that's nice. Whereabouts were the hotels you managed, mostly?
UK, around the UK.
Up and down the land.
Never worked outside the UK.
Round of applause for Steve, please. I like that.
Awesome.
Very lovely. James tells me that in the Maldives they decide themselves. But it would become a sort of market issue. You wouldn't get away with it for very long, not with TripAdvisor and things like that these days. You claim you've got 11 stars and you're just sort of operating some sort of tin pot operation. You'd soon be found out. Joe's in Cambridge. Joe, question or answer?
Oh, it's an answer, please.
Carry on.
For the rainbows.
Rainbows.
Up above the streets and houses. Are you in the shower?
I thought I was for a minute then. I do apologise. Yeah. Carry on.
So the bit of the rainbow that you see isn't all of it. It's actually a full circle.
Yes.
You might have seen something about that before.
I have. Theoretically, it's a full... I mean, it would... If you could somehow see it, you would be
if you could see all of it, yeah. If you were in an aeroplane or something, you'd see it. But essentially, the brighter part is what's inside of that circle, where all of the light rays that have been refracted by rain,
yes, of course,
all sort of meet in the middle.
Yeah, of course. That makes perfect sense. Qualifications?
Physics degree.
It's nice, that. So it's refraction?
Yes.
And the light is making its way through the rainbow into the middle, and therefore it's lighter?
Yeah.
Round of applause. I think I understand that. It seems to make perfect sense to me. Top man. Thank you, Joe. Jeremy's in Cobham. Question or answer, Jeremy?
Answer.
Carry on.
As to the mortgage rates.
Paul's mortgage specifically. Where's all his money?
Well, ultimately, it goes to the bank's trading P&L.
Yep.
But it doesn't mean because it's doubled that their profits have doubled, because banks borrow money not too much. We have something called fractional reserve banking, where we don't match deposits versus loans, and bank dealing desks might borrow overnight and lend 30 years or vice versa. So it's not a straight correlation between his mortgage doubling. And ultimately, mortgage markets is a free market competition between all the banks.
So where does the money end? The money that he's paying more money than he was before. Is it going to exactly the same places as it was before, just in different proportions?
It just goes to the bank's interest rate trading desks, basically. But it may be a loss because they may have borrowed it at a much higher rate
than they're getting it back up. So it's a constant.
It's a constant thing because interest rates go from overnight out to 40 years.
Yes, of course.
And banks take a decision how to. There's a thing called the gap, which is where they mismatch the liabilities and the loans. And there's many things go towards contributing to that interest rate, not only
Lovely
the base
stuff.
rate.
Well played. Qualifications?
I used to trade interest rates.
That'll do nicely. I have actually got a favourite this week, and it is Tea Towel Man. Was it Martin in Durham? Martin, was it, in Durham? Yeah, that was one of my favourite answers of all time, that about the tea towels. I hope Georgina was happy with it. Georgina, of course, asked the question. That's it from me for another day. We'll do it all again tomorrow from 10. If you missed any of today's show, you can, of course, listen on Catch Up on Global Player, where you can listen to all your radio shows. You can pause, you can rewind live radio. There's podcasts. There's all sorts of things going to make you a cup of tea, apparently, wouldn't it? So download it now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's only Tom Swarbrick, but now it's Sheila Fogarty.
That was very Pope John Paul II, what you did with your arms there.
I was gesturing.
I know.
To convey the fact that my script was not in front of me. But you'd think by now we could do it.
You
from
did it
memory.
very elegantly.
You'd think we'd be able to, if you miss any of today's show, you can listen back on.
I can't remember anything.
Can you not?
So, no.
Well, good luck.
James O'Brien on LBC.